Hello, a very good morning, afternoon, or evening to you all, wherever you are in the world. It's my great pleasure to open this World Urban Campaign, a COP26 event today, and to welcome you all to this milestone event. We are in the second week of a very critical COP to gather the maximum commitments to limit the warming increase to 1.5 degrees in 2050. This is a very challenging moment for us all. Right now, countries are figuring out how to slow global warming and making pledges. Cities, businesses, and other stakeholders are also doing the same and committing to action. Determination is key to our future. I'm very happy to welcome determined people like you here today, experts and activists on the ground trying to make things happen. All of them have led or participated in Urban Thinkers campuses in 2021. They have recommendations and can share with us their solutions and inspire others. They all believe that climate action is possible and that we have the power to change. We are off track to achieve the Paris Agreement target and the SDGs in 2030. We cannot lose time any longer, and we need to take action now. One way is to join hands in cities and communities to accelerate action through catalytic partnerships and by promoting the best solutions to the current challenges. That is the spirit of the World Urban Campaign. In 2021, the World Urban Campaign is dedicated to climate action. World Urban Campaign partners have organized a set of Urban Thinkers campuses on the lead to the Climate Summit COP26 in Glasgow. Campus events were meant to explore climate action solutions and share actions to accelerate climate action to achieve the cities we need. Cities that are low carbon, cities that are resilient, cities that are safe, cities that are healthy and inclusive, ensuring homes, services, and mobility to all, with a strong sense of place while learning and innovative. The current challenges demand urgency and ambition. The COP26 is a call to the world to rapidly ramp up action. This requires a strong advocacy and engagement to help galvanize and connect people and actors, to take action for an inclusive and sustainable urban future. I'm convinced that the World Urban Campaign can help in that global advocacy effort. A great thanks to UN Habitat and especially, of course, Christine O'Clair and her team for organizing this event. They have organized Urban Thinkers campuses for the past 8 years, and it has been a tremendous success. Welcome again to you all, and I wish you a very productive meeting. Allow me to hand to the co-chairs, Sri, Sofyan, and Sandeep Chakra, and we thank them also for helping to organize, of course, the two co-chairs and the World Urban Campaign Steering Committee to introduce this event. Sri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bert. A very good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And thank you for joining this session. It is a very important learning session. We call it a learning event because, as Bert mentioned, this is also the culmination and the recommendation and the learning that we will hear from people, from groups that have organized and take action on the ground. And that's most important, action on the ground. And in addressing climate change, localization is very important. So this session will be about 3 hours, more or less, and it will be organized in 4 panels. Yeah. So before the start of the first panel, we will hear a synthesis from the Secretariat on the overall solution and the theme that we have organized, the Urban Thinkers campus that we have organized throughout the year 2021. Then we will start with panel 1, which will focus on the theme of localizing climate action. We have at least 4 speakers there. The second panel will focus on the theme of planning and designing for climate resilience. The third panel will focus on guiding climate action. And the fourth panel, addressing vulnerability. So we have all together, we are very excited with this event. We have more than 20 speakers who are bringing with them more people, more groups, more action on the ground, and we look forward to hear from them the learnings and what we can do together moving forward to address climate change, adaptation, and also building our resilience in our cities and human settlement. So I'm passing it out now to Sandeep. Sandeep, it's yours now, the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste and greetings to everybody. My name is Sandeep Chachra. I have the honor of being the co-chair for the steering committee of the World Urban Campaign, together with my august colleagues here on the panel and off it, and along with, of course, Sri and Bert, who introduced today's session. All courtesies observed. We've just ended Urban October, the month of urbanism celebrated by UN Habitat and the World Urban Campaign across the world. And we are at the COP time now, as Bert was speaking. Very crucial times. As the Secretary General of the UN said, the battle against climate change will be won or lost in cities. We know the world is rapidly urbanizing, particularly in specific continents of Asia and Africa. And of course, Latin Americas and Europe have already urbanized. So by 2050, an overwhelming percentage of our people on the planet will be in cities of various kinds, big, small, clean, not so clean. One can run their imaginations there. So very, very warm welcome at this very crucial times when the destinies of future will be determined in the cities of tomorrow. I welcome all the participants who joined in. I welcome the august speakers who are here, and I'm particularly honored to be with all you august speakers, great leaders in their own spaces globally, great thinkers, great speakers. So very, very warm welcome, and my colleagues at the World Urban Campaign Secretariat. I just want to say that this is the time for climate action. It can't wait. It just can't wait forever. The COP doesn't seem to be giving too many hopes for the moment. We hope it changes for the better. And we all, as citizens of this planet, as citizens of this world, as urban activists, thinkers, researchers, academics, corporates, have a bolstering role to play in building those futures. And the time is to act now. I won't extend any further. I'll get time to moderate a later session. But in the meanwhile, allow me to welcome Ms. Christine Auclair. Christine is coordinating the World Urban Campaign and many other aspects within of the UN Habitat based in Nairobi. Wonderful to have you here, Christine. You have organized this program, so I hand it over to you. Christine is going to present to us the results of what happened in the various urban thinkers and action campuses over this year, the solutions which are coming out, and the hope which is emanating, and the challenges which lie ahead of us. And once again, Christine, to invite you to present your findings and your ideas on the same. And once again, we look forward to a very fruitful discussion. Keep joined in, stay till the very end. You have the best speakers to listen to today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you, Bert. Thank you, Sri, for the welcome introduction. And I'm very happy to meet all of you today. So this event is about learning from the UTCs held so far. Here I can provide a few concrete results of what we got from those UTCs and the report we got. We got only 9 reports so far. We have a total of 27 UTCs in 2021, started in February, and it will end beginning of December. Of course, this event today will also present solutions that were not already in the reports, but it's just the beginning of a synthesis out of 9 reports. Number of participants so far, I think we are around plus 6,000. We can't really tell. We are told last week that one UTC alone had more than 4,000 participants. So it's very difficult to say, but it's minimum 6,000 and maybe 10. Number of speakers, panelists, also it's an estimate of 200 people. Number of organizations, at least 400 organizations in 2021. Next. So also at the end of the year, we are going to prepare a full report of all the solutions provided by those UTCs. So it's a mix of solutions and also recommendations that sometimes are general, sometimes very general, and sometimes very concrete. So I'm really presenting here a mix of a different level of solution and recommendation, and I'm not going to go into detail. So we had a UTC on public space that has been a very strong subject in the past, and the role of participation. And it was done by the Norwegian Institute, University of Science and Technology with UN Habitat and other partners and cities. And basically the solutions were about food garden, food forest, I mean, nature-based solutions linked to the informal settlements. So we talk about green belt also, and tools that take nature into account in the public space. Talking also about blue space and the issue of flooding in the context of climate change. So a lot on informal economies as well. Next. So we had a UTC on Beirut on the link between climate heritage and building back better, about new urban planning approaches, new energy efficient method, the restoration of the port of Beirut as a solution, the role of creative industry, cultural life, participatory approaches based on community, and also the national level. But here it's a mix of recommendation and some concrete solution. UTC on urbanism, the missing link to responding to climate change. We had a solution on creative finance strategies, taxation policies, and some initiative related to advocacy and processes. Then we had a UTC on hot cities, a very important subject that brought together the Isocarp Institute and the Middle East Cities Center, focusing on educational activity, capacity building, tools for climate adaptation, roadmaps, and strategies. So it was primarily about the processes. Then we had a UTC on localization for climate action, organized by Compass Housing Services. And Dave Adamson is one of the speakers in panel 1. Is going to explain better than those 2 bullet points here that I have on technical, social change through technical innovation, smart city strategy, and the role of technology. I think these are, they had a very strong impact and in localizing climate action in the New South Wales region, I think. Dave will explain better than me. Then we had a UTC on children at the front and center, organized by World Vision, Plan International, and UNICEF. And here we had a lot of concrete examples and projects, in particular in Indonesia, Philippines, Bangladesh, Mongolia, and Jordan, by using participatory processes and education to build resilience, urban resilient planning around the risk as well. Then we had one UTC, a strong one on legislation and tools for climate action. So here a lot of tools, training, capacity building, and the use of different techniques to reach out to people. So that was also a very productive UTC. Then we had one on climate action for resilient communities and for women. And again, here we'll have a presentation in this meeting about their different tools and projects using a gender lens and taking gender into account in different levels of decision making. And finally, we had different initiative and project in West Africa presented in a UTC on planning the African metropolis, organized by FNO, which is a French Federation of Planning Agency, Institut Paris Région, and Climate Change, 3 partners. And it's a mix of recommendation, general recommendation, then a presentation of projects. And Adeline Fauré will also speak on that in the panel 2 today. So I will end also on one UTC, the last one, which we receive a report from. So as I said before, we had 9 reports talking about proactive leadership, advocating for climate and equity. So it was mostly talking about advocacy, and advocacy has been very important in changing the paradigm and changing the mentality and the commitment and the level of ambition for the COP. So it has to continue, and this UTC has really focused on that, on advocacy. So I'll end here just to say that there is plenty in terms of recommendation, talking about resilience, adaptation, and maybe a bit less about carbon technology. It was not that technology oriented, it was more about processes, and then building synergies in different contexts, and raising issues towards recommendation and proposing concrete tools. So I think during these UTCs today, we are going to collect more of your solutions, more of your ideas, and then build this process up to the end of the year. So we have a solid report by the end of the year, robust solutions and robust recommendation that we can comfortably share with all externally within the WUC, as of course, because this is meant to inspire different partners and see how they can replicate those solutions in different contexts, but also now to share it at higher levels with member states and other audiences through UN Habitat and your networks of partners, of course. So I'd like to hand over here to Ben for panel 1. So Ben Wong, welcome. Thank you. Over to you.
Oh, thank you, Christine. And once again, welcome everybody. Thank you for taking time, waking up early, staying late in the night, and taking time to attend this event. My name is Ben Wong, and I'm the moderator for panel 1 on localizing climate action. I work for Campus Housing Services, an international NGO based in Australia, and I'm just responsible for stakeholder management. And I'm also the co-chair of the WUC CSO, civil society organization, PCG. Yeah, so localization is commonly associated with the following: locally and community-led initiative, active engagement of local stakeholders, including the affected, in identifying and implementing solutions, self-determination, and local capacity building. Localization is often based on the principle of using local knowledge, mobilizing local capacity and resources to solve local problems. Localizations are aimed to have local ownership and sustainability. Lastly, localization has been closely associated with climate action, resilient and adaptation, localizing of the new urban agenda, the sustainable development goal, and sustainable development. Today, we have the pleasure of having 3 speakers who will share with us their experiences and learning in implementing localizing actions. And in the area of climate action, voluntary local review on SDG and action planning for a metropolitan city. Now, we only have 20 minutes, so I'm going to ask each of the speakers 3 questions. And unfortunately, they have 5 to 6 minutes to answer them. And well, hopefully we have some time for questions. If not, then, we'll probably have a summary, sent to you all sometime. So let me just introduce the first speaker. The first speaker is a colleague of mine, Professor Dave Adamson. He is the Group Chief Strategic Engagement Officer with Compass. Now I'll let Dave have a sentence about himself, and then I could then start asking him the questions. Dave, to you.
Thank you, Ben, and hello to all colleagues throughout the globe here. I'm very pleased to be part of this important event. About myself, I'm the Group Strategic Engagement Officer, as Ben said. My primary responsibilities at Compass are advocacy for social housing, the New Urban Agenda, SDGs, and quite a major research role. So that's pretty much what I do.
Okay, thank you, Dave, for that. Now, so I will, ask you the first question. Okay, in relation to the project or the initiative you have, could you describe the participatory process that was used for your voluntary local review?
Well, we haven't actually completed a voluntary local review yet. The UTC was targeted at the Hunter region of New South Wales in Australia. It's a geographic rather than a formal administrative region. And we saw the UTC as firstly promoting the Decade of Action for Climate Change, and bringing together lots of parties we knew were working in the field, and developing the profile, particularly of the SDG task force for the region, which has been established in the last 18 months. We covered some fairly obvious topics around climate change, things like the circular economy, a just transition away from fossil fuels, which the region is very dependent on as an extractive industry. We looked at the role of local government, but our overarching purpose was to establish a coalition that would develop a voluntary local review, a VLR, and that would build on existing collaborations, but bring increasingly more partners into the process. And the 2 objectives for that was, 1, to establish a baseline of where we were in the region, and the second really was to develop a process that would take us through to 2030 with what we hope to be biannual reports. And we felt that this is as a vehicle for expanding those who come into the actions for climate change, and particularly around the New Urban Agenda and the SDGs. I can report that the coalition has been established. The small planning group has met now for the last month and a half, quite frequently, and we intend to launch in January the formal appeal for partners to join us in producing the VLR. And our target date is for December 2022 to present that VLR. So we see it as a key part of the localization agenda, and particularly advocating and developing interest in the New Urban Agenda and the SDGs.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Now, the thing about the localization is that how do we link, the input of the local, consultation and the input and the engagement to the next level, and to the next level. So the next question is really, how did your, voluntary local review relate or link to the next level or other level of government?
Well, we see it as multi-level and not just government. We see it particularly, we have partners in the state legislation, we have the city authority, and we have another 9 local authorities that are partner to it. But we also have some larger public bodies like the water utility for the region. We have NGOs like ourselves, Compass Housing, some charitable organizations providing services to women and children. We see the business community as part of this. So we want to try and develop a very comprehensive VLR that reports from every sector of society, particularly against the 17 SDGs. Some of them will be foregrounded, some of them will be less important, but we want to have a story to tell on each of them, and particularly to establish that baseline.
Yeah. So for organizations, who would like to sort of run similar process, what would be some of the critical factors or some of the advice that you could offer to them so that, to start them along, the process?
I think the experience tells us it has to be easy to collaborate. We don't want formality and barriers and membership criteria and all the kind of things that can get in the way of a participative model. We want a sense of equality. So, no organization would be privileged in this, whether it's the state authority or the city authority or a small local charity. We will see equal weight to their contribution. And I think that's important. And the stress on participation, I think, and the flexibility in what we measure to regard what local organizations regard as important to measure. One of the challenges, I think, is translating the high-level targets of the SDGs and the concerns of the New Urban Agenda to things that small organizations can relate to and target in their own actions. And that will be an important part, I think, of developing this localization agenda.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave. I mean, we hear a lot about localization of the New Urban Agenda, the SDG and the sustainable development. It's good to hear, how in actual implementation they occur, at those levels. So thanks a lot, Dave, for that. Now we'll now have a privilege to hear the second speaker. Our second speaker is Christian Huber. Christian Huber is the head of the Department of Strategic Governance from the city of Mannheim. Have I got it right, Christian? Mannheim from Germany. Yeah, can I get you to introduce yourself in a sentence and then I can ask you the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Yes, I'm from Mannheim, located in Germany. And thank you, first of all, to the chair and the co-chair, Bert, Sri, Sandeep, but also the secretariat, Christine, for this great event. Because learning events are for city very practical, and you get a great overview and you get very practical hints for how to achieving your sustainable development goals. I am responsible for strategic development and the policy processes in the city of Mannheim, and this means combining sustainable strategies with participation, but also with the city councillors here.
Okay, thank you for that, Christian. Just the first question for you is that now, how would you describe the main element of your, climate actions in Mannheim, in your city plan?
Yeah, first of all, we developed a mission statement 2030 with the citizens of Mannheim, which was localizing the sustainable development goals. And we've done this with the Urban Thinkers campuses. And this mission statement with localizing the sustainable development goals was kind of mind-opening to all the units, but also the people in the city for a more holistic and integrated thinking. So that we were looking for more what we are doing, what is affecting others. And also we stepped in more into an evidence-based policy discussion, because also the sustainable development goals with their indicators are measuring the progress. And this was a very good thing for us for starting a process which is now concentrated on the climate action field. And in this climate action field, we also see, as in other things, trying hard is not good enough. We have to deliver and we have to take actions. And therefore, we were identifying the gaps in Mannheim. We were looking for what we have done, but what is also needed for the future. And we developed in the beginning of the year a framework for a local Green Deal, that we are saying we want to have concrete municipal action in Mannheim. And this means a local Green Deal with the citizens, with the companies. It's a collaborative deal that we say we all are responsible for a climate neutral Mannheim. And so we are looking for the actions. What can we do as an administrations? What can the citizens do? But also what can the industry do? And so we identified different fields like the sustainable energy, the mobility, the biodiversity, but also the food systems. And now we are looking to get into concrete deals with the citizens, but also with the companies that we are saying, when we do this, what are you doing to achieve our goal in 2030? And we also were creating a Mannheim message on building local green deals in Europe, and we are now sharing this vision so that other cities are following. And beyond this, we also were creating some climate action plans in the mobility, but also heat adaptation plans or zero plastic plans. So you see, we have a big vision, and under these we have the plans, and now we are going into the local green deals. But we also see that the local green deals have to be just. And this is a big issue in Mannheim. We are a very diverse city, and we see that we want the transition, we want the green transition, but we have to look what social effects it has. And so it has to be also a just transition.
Yeah. This sounds like a great project. The thing is, are you able to give us some example of some key results that you can see out of the project that you have implemented?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, three years ago, it was almost impossible to think that we have a goal that we want to be climate neutral in 2030. But our discussion with the World Urban Campaign, the Thinker Campus being at the World Urban Forum, there was a change in mind. And now at the COP26, the mayor of Mannheim, Dr. Kurz, formulated Mannheim wants to be climate neutral at 2030. And this is a really big game changer to have this first in mind, to say we want to be climate neutral in 2030 and not only like the other European cities in 2050. And this is very hard to achieve, I know, but the goal is set, and this was impossible for me in 2 or 3 years ago. In concrete, for instance, we changed a military area, a former military area, into a green belt, about 60 hectares. There were also other ideas like having logistics on it, etc. But in the theme of what is sustainable for the city of Mannheim, we are changing it into a green belt. And we are having a garden exhibition in 2023 with the big theme of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have a big green zone in the inner city, which was also unthinkable. We also are planting trees these years, about 60,000 trees. And we were testing this year with citizens in their neighborhood what it means if the neighborhood is car-free. Because usually when you're discussing mobility, it's always the thing about car and the parking places. And this is very crucial in Germany because everybody wants to have a car and wants to park it. And so we have to make mind changes that we say, okay, let's have a look on one weekend what it looks like having no cars in your neighborhood. And then the people were coming together, they were talking, they were having culture on the street, and they said, okay, it's better to have an urban and consumptive-free space than having the cars on the street. So you have to make experience in the people's mind that they are saying, okay, now we want to change our minds. We also set up a green tech startup center. We have a lot of startup centers, but we say, okay, we want to have more startups in the green tech sector. And so we are building a startup center for startups here who are inventing solutions for green tech. And we also were rising up sustainable education programs in the kindergarten for regional food, but also for avoiding waste. And there we have a program where we are seeking the little children for being a climate hero. And then they get an application and say, okay, you're a climate hero here. And we are also identifying at the moment the regional value chains and trying to get the industry more into the industry of a common good. And so there were some examples of what we have done in the concrete action.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Christian. That was really quite a handful of example. Okay, that's good to have those indicators. Now, just in line with localization. Okay, I mean, just a question here is that, you know, how effective is the local action plan such as yours in comparison to the bigger picture or the bigger scale kind of climate action taken, let's say, by different level government?
I mean, you need both. You need the big action from the national states, but I think cities and urban areas are crucial. I mean, we all know it, more than the half of the people are living in urban areas. 80% of the GDP is right there, but also 70% of the CO2 emissions. So we have to attack climate change on the local level. And there we are direct in contact with the people and their living conditions. I mean, usually the national state is there and the people are living in the cities. So when we want to change behaviors in mobility, in food, in working areas, etc., we have to address them on the local level best. And we hope when we, like other cities, are going to be front runners, others are following, and so we create a movement and get here a bigger leverage that we're saying, okay, the cities are more front runner than the national states, and so the national states have to follow. And therefore, I think it's good when you want to achieve a movement and want to achieve local action there for climate change.
Okay, thanks a lot for the example and the learning. Okay, so thank you so much. Now we'll go to the next speaker. The third speaker we have is Dr. Parisa Kos. I hope I got everything right. Cross? Yep, okay. Yeah, can I pass it to you for one sentence introduction, and then I can raise a question with you, yeah?
Yes, hello everyone. First of all, thank you so much, World Urban Campaign team, for inviting me to present here, Kuala Lumpur Urban Thinker Campus. And my name is Parisa Klos. I'm Executive Director of Resilient Urban Planning Development Company based in Germany. And I'm mostly working on urban climate change planning.
Sure, thank you so much. Yeah. So I'm KL is very close to my heart because I used to come from Singapore. So probably, we'll be glad to hear from you. Now, the first question to you is that, could you describe the main element of action planning, okay, I mean, climate action planning in relation to the planning in Kuala Lumpur?
Kuala Lumpur City Hall is required by law to prepare 3 plans that will guide policy and control development for Kuala Lumpur, which are the Structural Plan 2040, the Local Plan 2040, and the Strategic Plan 2021 to 2031. So the local development committed in those documents to capture and integrate the strategic and spatial related issues for climate action in the city, along with supporting policies that will ensure that Malaysia or Kuala Lumpur's long-term development is planned to prevent rather than exacerbate climate change. To accelerate action, Kuala Lumpur City Hall has recently developed the Kuala Lumpur Climate Action Plan 2050 to guide the actions required by the Council and its stakeholders to achieve the objective of the Paris Agreement. This climate action plan will integrate existing plans in previous and current documents, including the identification of climate actions contained within these documents for short-term as well as long-term transformative actions. This integrated approach aims to ensure that climate-related goals and targets set by the city are at the heart of the city's strategic planning framework and can achieve both carbon neutrality and climate resilience in the medium term by 2030 and long term by 2050.
Now, in terms of, localization is really engagement of local, stakeholder and players, okay? So could you just share with us, what are some of the way that you engage the local player, the stakeholder, and what is the result so far?
Actually, Malaysia or Kuala Lumpur already trying to somehow develop this climate action plan in an inclusive manner. So basically, by incorporating inclusivity in climate action planning, we can reflect the voices of all the people. And throughout the KL climate action planning process, there has been an emphasis on prioritizing and designing climate actions with inclusivity in mind. So basically, we will not be able to successfully implement the plan without the support of citizens. In this respect, Kuala Lumpur City Hall will execute the action points identifying this plan in an inclusive manner through collective collective effort with various agencies, private sector participants, and also community members in order to achieve its goals of being a long-term carbon neutral and resilience by 2050. So basically, Kuala Lumpur already create this action plan, but there are also some barriers to implement this action plan on the ground. So in this regard, we are organizing another Urban Thinker campus that will be in next month, and with the help of different German partners like Mannheim City, GIZ, BMZ, RUPD, we are going to discuss this issue on the ground and help Kuala Lumpur to somehow push to implement this climate action plan on the ground.
I mean, from our own knowledge of Kuala Lumpur, I know that it is a very cosmopolitan as well as very diverse and with many different culture and ethnic group. Now, in view of that, how will you sort of reflect, the engagement and the opinion and the input from all these various diverse groups?
Yes, actually, we are trying to somehow bring also the local community on, at the table. So in the first Urban Thinker campus that we organized in 2019, we try to also bring different stakeholders on the table, and we use a tool called that actually developed by GIZ called City Work Tool, and we try to hear from different stakeholders as well as communities, local communities, to see what exactly is their challenge. So we map this challenge as well as we prioritize what kind of challenges there are there that we have to take immediate action. So based on that first Urban Thinker campus, we are going to have the second one and discuss further that how we can implement and tackle these challenges on the ground.
Yeah, it's good to know that one UTC can then lead off to other UTC. That is a good way to go along. Yeah. Just for because of time, we just have to conclude this. But just in concluding, I was just thinking that if there is, can I get the speakers, okay, to actually give one takeaway for people who is attending this seminar with regard to localization of climate action. Dave, can I start with you? Just one takeaway.
One word: collaborate.
Yeah, that seems to be. How about you, Christian?
Mind changing.
For me, it's not about the action plan, but the climate action, because cities that have a plan are more likely to take action. Let's take action.
Man, I tell you, are so quick to the mark. Can I just get you all to have one more shot and another word, since you're all so short and sharp?
Okay,
Dave,
action.
Have another one more takeaway.
Action.
Action.
Action. It has to be action. No more talk.
Yes. Okay.
Christine, last word before I pass it to Kelly.
You're muted.
Sorry, I step in. Action is the word.
Okay, fine. That seems to be the conclusion. Thank you so much, the speakers for your contribution, and I hope that every one of us could take something, from this session. Can I just pass it to Kelly now for panel 2? Kelly.
Excellent. Well, great job, panel one. That was really informative. I'm Kelly Moore. I'm the Secretary General for the Commonwealth Association of Planners. It's an honor for me to be here as part of the World Urban Campaign. I'm going to be moderating panel 2, and there's 2 parts to panel 2. So we are planning and design for climate resilience. And our first panel is going to be on public space, heritage, and climate resilience. And our second panel, so there'll be 3 speakers there. And then in our second panel, which is panel B, we're going to be addressing the needs of growing and warming cities. So I'll just quickly give an introduction to this topic, and then I will briefly introduce the first speaker. And similar to Ben, I'll just sort of say the name, and I hope I do that well. And then introduce yourself, if you don't mind, just very briefly, and then we'll begin into the questions. So I'll begin. So planning and design for climate resilience. The city we need adopts climate-proof planning, sets emissions, reduction targets, and strategies to reduce these emissions, along with innovative urban design and mobility plans. It uses spatial planning and other decision support systems to support proactive and coordinated cross-cutting urban adaptation and mitigation across urban sectors. It lays emphasis on the preparation of actionable frameworks for better climate-proof integrated urban design. The city we need thrives on nature and culture. It recognizes the capacities and limitations of the natural systems which support it, values biodiversity and ecosystem services for the roles they play in urban health, environmental protection, aesthetics, and livability. It incorporates cultural heritage, indigenous and traditional practices and techniques, as well as other community-based solutions in climate change mitigation, adaptation, planning, and strategies. So with that, I'd like to first welcome Ms. Camille Cortez with the Planning Initiative and the Planning Initiative Climate Summit. Ms. Cortez, can you please introduce yourself? Okay, hopefully she's not on mute. But maybe while we're sorting that out, I can go to the second panelist, and then we'll come back to Camille, if that is okay. So our second speaker in the first panel is Mr. Eric Hubretz, who is with Climate, Heritage, and Public Space. Mr. Hubretz, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hello.
Nice to be here.
Excellent.
And so just two words, I am an architect and urban planner working for the Institut Paris Région. So we're planning Paris region. It's a real headache, but very interesting. And I am in charge of international affairs. So we have about 20 cities cooperation projects each year, everywhere in the world. And I am also the director of the Regional Agency of Biodiversity.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being here. So we're going to start with the first question, which is how can heritage be incorporated into climate action? And could you provide an example or two?
There is, we are part of a network, which is a Climate Heritage Network. It was implemented 3 years ago with reports under the umbrella of ICOMOS, so the International Council of Monuments and Sites, that support with 11,000 experts, heritage experts worldwide in 132 countries to support the UNESCO and the World Heritage Sites. So the Climate Heritage Network is an initiative with about more than 200 institutional partners, and to tackle the question of climate and heritage. And so we first we produce a first book to identify all the links for cultural and natural heritage with climate change. So we produce a book. The name is The Future of Our Past. It is published on the UNESCO site and the ICOMOS site, for example. Easy to find. And now we are preparing recommendation, policy papers and guidelines to tackle this question with a lot of experts using our network. And we just finished in September a survey, international survey to have a look on what is how the planning system or how the climate change planning that when exists take into consideration heritage. In fact, there is very few. And so it's very difficult, but it's a challenge, in fact, because heritage has a very specific place in planning for identity, for culture, of course, but it's also a witness for the changes. And it gives also some lessons for the adaptation of different bodies. It could be nature, it could be buildings, it could be urban fabric, it could be public space to find a new solution to be adapted to our challenges. So this is something really important. So there is a lot of difficulties. So it's a big challenge, but there is a lot of solution that is produced. For example, Eastern architecture is fundamentally well adapted to very high level temperature in Central Asia, for example. And so it's much more better, much more efficient than concrete. So this is, first point.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So, and definitely a complex challenge, but one I think that is getting some more awareness. So on the next question, how do you think heritage and innovation can complement each other in terms of addressing climate change? You know, often we think of heritage as sort of the past, and to the point on your book, in terms of the past is the future. How do we kind of join that with any innovations? And can you give any concrete examples of where you've seen that happen?
There is a different aspect we can take into consideration with heritage. The first one is, of course, witness of the past. So as we say with earthen architecture, for example, or bioclimatic architecture, which is the case for most of the heritage buildings. But the other thing is the role of heritage to attract cultural activities, to attract creative class. And when we are facing crisis, it could be a COVID crisis, it could be a climate that will happen, and that will create a lot of problems in the city. We need more solidarity. And the role of culture is to put the different identity together, not to separate. Identity go to separation, culture put them together. And so to define or to produce some place where people are recognize their roots and with different identity is something fundamental to support the development of cultural activity, to have more social link in the society, and the social link is crucial to face crisis. So I would like to, so this is different than to recreate a fake heritage, as I am in Doha for example, these few days, and there is a lot of products, pastiche products. So it's very nice, it's a cultural product, etc. So that creates some, they hope to create some dynamic, and I don't know if there is some, many people are going there. You can find the same thing in other cities. And but in fact, there is a lot of production, urban production that is done, which is empty, and what is very and with the idea with the architect and the promoter and the other actors say we want to have a specific identity for this place, and but it is the idea is to have a good branding and to attract investors. Okay, but when it is empty, what are we doing with our cities when you have 20% of empty apartments in China, at the scale of China? It is dozens of millions. This use a lot of cement for nothing, create a lot of carbon emission, iron, sand. So we have a big problem with sand worldwide. And we are continuing to produce big cities. For example, in Egypt, 30% of empty apartments, 32 new towns, quasi empty, and they are creating another new town for 6.5 million inhabitants. So what are we doing in our system? And so the question is much more larger than to design a very nice public space to attract people, etc. If you produce cities for nothing, you are producing a city for a lot of carbon emission for nothing. And so I think planners should think about that, and decision makers should change their business, not to make planning for business, to change their mindset, not make planning for business, but planning for climate and planning for people.
Excellent segue. So what do you think is sort of a solution or an action takeaway or recommendation from your campus that you'd like to share with us today?
Yes, there is a lot to do. So we are working on biodiversity. We're working a lot on public space and on nature-based solution. It is not only on public space, it is also on buildings. It's everywhere to connect and to put more nature in the city. And probably this creates another business because it is less interesting for landscape architects and for companies to produce something which is less expensive. Mm-hmm. And when it is 3-4 times less expensive when you use nature-based solution, but it is much more productive for cities. We have a lot, huge production documentation example everywhere, in Paris, in London, in a lot of cities. So this is the way. We know that this is the way. The question is how to support municipalities to implement this, to change their mindset for zero phyto, for nature-based solutions. So for that, we in Paris, for example, but in France, larger than that, we support municipality with territorial engineering to help them not to design the project, but to help them to orient the project in a good orientation and to hire the consultancy to design something which is related to nature-based solution. So the planners should play this role, and so it is not good for business. I'm very sorry for that, but for the GDP, etc. But the good solutions are not so expensive; they are less expensive.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your comments. And we're going to go to the next speaker, and if there's some time, we might be able to come back and take some questions. So the next speaker that I'd like to introduce. So I'm just going to quickly say your name and sort of your UTC, and then if you would mind introducing yourself in a minute or so, and then we'll go into the questions. So Professor Dr. Peter Ghosh with the Sustainable Urban Development, who was on social resilience, public space, and climate action. Are you on the call today?
Hello. Yeah, thanks. As most of you know, or many of you know, there was another name in the program. It was my colleague Ayanda Roji from Johannesburg, and unfortunately she fell ill, and I was one of the hosts and organizers of this Urban Thinkers Campus. And so I'm replacing her. So I won't be able to give you that detailed information from the city of Johannesburg, but I hope to give you a good overview about what we did. It was the first Urban Thinkers Campus in February, the first in the series. And for my name, and my role is Peter Ghosh. I'm a professor at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. I'm originally from Germany, and since many years I'm working on international urban development with also a specific focus on public space, for example.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you for being here, and please send our regards to Miss Ayani, please. Yes. All right. Well, then it sounds like you will do just fine in answering some of these questions, though. So we're going to talk a bit about Johannesburg, and it sounded like there's been sort of a specific approach taken in Johannesburg with respect to public space in relation to addressing the challenges of climate action. Well, can you share a little bit about what is happening in Johannesburg and with respect to public space or addressing climate change?
Sure. So first of all, I shared a link with you with a small documentation of our Urban Thinkers Campus. That's going also to expand on some things that I mentioned today. There is one part of the page, it's more the announcement, and the other part is the report. But from Johannesburg, so I've worked with them now for maybe 15 years. And what was really remarkable is, first of all, the challenge they have. The Johannesburg Department of City and Parks, they have several thousand of parks and green spaces, and it's like a huge city, and they are under-resourced. And what they did is, of course, it's also debatable, but they have they have decided they want to also certain focus on pilot projects and demonstration projects. So they selected maybe 20 or 30 of the park and public spaces and put the special attention on those ones. And not to say that the others are completely neglected, but they use those ones to develop pilot projects. You know? So for example, related to climate change, Ayanda presented one place in a park. It is the Best Valley Park, and this Department of Park and the Zoo, they have supported that there will be a farm that is run by the community, and in this project of this farm also there is job generation, there is of course agriculture happening, and so it was like a showcase of a project that is very integrative, where also, and this is like the second like a learning and also demonstration from Johannesburg, how the different sections and departments started to collaborate with each other and form into the departmental planning groups. You know, so for example, when we developed another park in Johannesburg, all of us know there is the road and traffic department, there is waste, and there is maybe social department because they are homeless. There will be the botanical people, and there will be all different kinds of responsibilities. No, it's always one of the challenges that is overseen by people not working for local government, how the whole issue of coordination, but also the issue that they have to announce tenders, and these tenders have you have to wait for 12 months, sometimes even longer, until you can then start implementing. You know, so all of these aspects have been addressed and have been very important there. So yeah, I think they try to implement it wherever it is possible. The other project was urban agriculture on sidewalks. That is a very important theme because it's not like a classical park, but it's the recognition that streets are also public spaces where actually very important ones, and this knowledge needs to be mainstreamed. But in addition to that, to provide the residents some space also to adopt and to run and to do some urban agriculture, you know, which then increases the social control and the atmosphere of the street. So I mean, the whole story also from this Urban Thinkers Campus, from the first one, the whole narrative is actually that even if we also focus on climate action and climate solutions, everything needs to be integrated, the social and the environmental. And in Johannesburg, you see they have been offering job training, for example, and just to address one aspect and only focus on that will create certain challenges and certain problems, and there are always many side effects. One really important, and maybe I'm already talking to another question here, but
which I'll go to here.
You know, one really important thing is that there are so many side effects. If you have good public spaces in the city that people could use and adopt, they don't have to be green, all of them. A good public space is creating social resilience in the best case. And then this social resilience, this conviviality is of course promoting also climate action, because the people build social capital, and they start to collaborate and they start to communicate in a different way. So that was one of one motivation actually why we started this Urban Thinkers Campus.
Excellent. I wanted to just pick up just before we wrap up and go to panel B. I wanted to pick up just on your particular expertise on ecological planning. And one of the aspects of this kind of discussion we wanted to understand was how the biodiversity in the space that was being designed and implemented, how that was incorporated, and what lens you brought in to sort of reestablishing that that ecological system and the biodiversity required for that.
See, I'm an urbanist, also an urban planner, and not a biologist, and I'm sure the biologists have a much better answer. But we do know that diversity is a big benefit. But also, when I saw the question in the list, also for Ayanda, I would say, from our perspective, no, we need the biodiversity as much as the social diversity. Would be one of the takeout lessons also from this Urban Thinkers Campus.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make public spaces that are open to many different kind of users. And of course, somehow this applies also to the natural world. Then, just to explain the urban ecological planning, sometimes it is being again, due to our kind of mainstream talking today, it is being seen too narrowly. Urban ecological planning is rooted in the Chicago Sociological School, and it was studying communities first. So again, it's about human sociology and it's about natural sociology, and we really need to combine the two.
Very good. Then last, really quickly, because I know we're maybe a little over time, but are there any actions then that from the Thinkers Campus that you wanted to share with us today?
Yes, so we also have created this list of priority actions. And then, for example, there are 10, but there will be too many to read out.
Yeah, just maybe their top one.
Yeah. So the top one is public spaces are vital for generation of social and environmental resilience. In action, these two agendas must be combined. And then in the other ones, we explore more how this could be done.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. That was very insightful. You did a great job pitch hitting. So just let Ayana know that. All right, we're going to go now to panel B. So panel B is addressing the needs of growing and warming cities. So I'd first like to call Mr. Cahild Abdulatif to introduce yourself, please, and let us know a little bit about you, and then we'll begin into the panel if you're there.
Hey guys, it's Khalid, like DJ Khalid without DJ.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I love it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Khalid Abdulatif. I am a senior associate working for ACOM. I have been in the region for 18 years, and I call the region the GCC. So I worked in Saudi, Qatar, UAE, Oman, Egypt, UAE, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Khalid, for
Khalid.
Yes.
Yes.
Khalid. Okay, excellent. Got it. So our first question is talking about, really the warming cities in the Middle East and the increasing challenges there. So how would you describe those challenges and maybe some successful urban design strategies that have been used to address or overcome those challenges?
Oh, thank you, Kelly, for that. Okay, I'm gonna be more practical and focus on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where I reside at the moment. Saudi has almost 3 climatic zones across it, between humid, the desert, which is almost everywhere. And there is a reason behind mentioning the climatic zone, because it will impact and it will be related to some of the urban design strategies and that's going on across the region. The main challenges we face as city planners and urbanists, basically about activation and the livability, especially that most of the open spaces and public realm are packed and active in the nights after lowering the temperature. That's one thing. Also, one of the main challenges, we can name it as adaptability to the natural conditions from shade, humidity that we have it. Also, one of the challenges that we have, I'm trying to be diversified in the challenges and group them, is the education and the capacity building programs in general, like lack of design and R&D. And I'm talking about local heritage design R&D. Of course, there have been initiatives for the last few years, but still it's not as strong or as promising. In addition to adaptability and compatibility to the climate knowledge, a lot of our climate knowledge are, let's say, exported from Europe, US, and it is getting a place now across the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. How are these challenges getting tackled through urban design strategies, city planning strategies? I could summarize it on urban greening strategies. They're already in the news. We're talking about billions, almost 10 billion tree across the kingdom are getting implemented as one phase of urban greening strategies. We're talking about eco-planning has been going intensively across the valleys that's scattered across the kingdom, in the south, even in Riyadh, the capital as well. We're talking about the urban circularity. The Royal Commission of Riyadh start applying the urban circularity in most of their strategic projects to make sure that we have a complete cycle of resources in and out, and rethinking and redesigning the flow of the resources. There are some good examples or some good strategies about urban farming on a micro scale. Basically in North Africa and Egypt, there are stuff still at the beginning here in the kingdom. We're talking about the most, let's say, the most branding and attractive now trend across the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is the humanization and pedestrianization. There are complete list of projects. So in a simple way, commercial wise, we're talking about, we have a concept master plan, let's make a detailed master plan and build it, boom. Right now, they start going through another cycle. Is it humanized? Does it encourage pedestrianization across the city? So the way we used to work have been changed. The municipalities, the royal commissions across the kingdom adopted this strategy in almost the majority of their projects now. And then I can end up the strategy with softening the zoning. So all the zoning planners in the cities, the coding, they start looking into zoning, and I can elaborate more about this, into increasing the open spaces, increasing the permitted uses within your development applications, soften it in a way of increasing the percentage per capita when it comes to green spaces and open areas. So those are like as a summary of high level urban design and city planning strategies that's going on across the region.
That's really interesting, because I think in the past sort of approach in the zoning has been that we have to regulate the space, the green space, and set aside. But what I think I hear you saying is we've softened it, and we're seeing people use more greening and sort of eco-friendly urban design in the work that they're doing. So can you give some examples or zoom in to sort of a site or a location where you've seen this implemented and even maybe replicated, but a project or something we can look to?
Yeah, I can. The example I'm going to share, it's actually a holistic solution that contains several projects from strategic into city level. For the last, there were initiative. Usually you have initiative come from a decision maker, turn it into a policy and a strategy, start apply it on city in terms of projects across the kingdom. There is a Green Riyadh initiative that started. So that's the decision maker. They are already involved in the climate related business now. 10 billion trees have been overseen for the coming years, but the target is 450,000 tree by 2030. So they start having it's like for them, for the decision maker, it's a low hanging fruit. So it's an example, it's going there. If you have a chance and walk across Riyadh city, especially if you visited before, you will notice the sidewalk widening that's happening. Start looking into planting the trees. So there is already a serious work going on as a low-hanging fruit. But in addition to this, you look into increasing the capita, the open spaces per capita from if I recall the number, from 1.7 square meter into 28 square meter by 2030. Imagine the jump that has been happening, and this project has been going on for almost 2 to 3 years. We'll talk about 16 times the previous rate that's happening. So this is something happening on ground on a mega or giga projects that we heard about it Neom or King Salman parks, into even the internal neighborhood that's happening across the city. 7.5 million trees are already in the process to get planted across the city of Riyadh. So it's a real example that's happening on ground now with many objectives. Part of it is transforming the visual perception of the city, balancing and mitigating the climatic challenges that Riyadh has been going on. And we believe, and I see as an urbanist, things are getting real from initiative into reality, and they are not only heading into Saudi Vision 2030, they are really targeting beyond that.
Oh, that's excellent. That's, I think, very, very promising. Thank you for sharing very much, Khalid. And we're going to go next to the next speaker. So, and if there's an opportunity for questions, we'll come back again. So, so next we have Mr. Max Yvat, Head of Governance, who is speaking on mass housing for resilience. Are you there, Max?
Yes, hello, I am here, Max Yvetot, yes. So I work as Head of Urban Governance at Strelka KB, which is an urban consultancy based in Moscow, Russia. And our UTC was, the topic was mass housing and climate change, and we organized it together with the Isocarp Institute and Milena Ivkovic, who's here together with us today, and also with the financial support of the delegation of the European Union in Russia.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being here. All right, so we're going to start with the first question. So can you explain how mass housing contributes to climate resilience, and what is mass housing?
Well, that's a good question, and there's actually no definition of what mass housing is. And in Europe, for instance, mass housing is often, well, people talk about social housing because most of the mass housing units is actually social housing. We understand mass housing as all units of housing which are high-rise and in which live approximately 500 people. And so it's usually blocks or towers, and we see them in many cities in the world, usually in the suburbs. And we wanted with this UTC to put the focus on this specific type of housing because we feel that we should have specific policies for mass housing, and which is different from other types of housing, for example, suburban sprawl, which should have its specific policies. And so in itself, mass housing cannot contribute to resilience. But we think that the regeneration of mass housing or the good planning of future mass housing could contribute to overall resilience. And the starting point of our UTC was actually the housing stock that was built mostly in the second half of the 20th century is not resilient at the time being. And to give a few, like an image, and I'm sure that all of you whichever the city you live in, you can see around mass housing units. And in Russia, because since we are based in Russia, in Moscow, we have more figures on this. Unfortunately, there are no figures overall in the world on the amount of mass housing that exists. But in Russia only, it is estimated that 70% of the urban population lives in mass housing units. So it's since there's about 80% of the population living in cities, it's about 50% of the population, so 70 million people living in mass housing units. So it's a huge share of the population, and so it's big figures. And the majority of those mass housing units were built in the Soviet times using industrial means of construction, and they had a good philosophy. The idea was to bring modernity to people, to provide them with space, with light, with private space, because they used to live in sometimes in barracks, sometimes in shared apartments, and so it was a sign of progress. But today, those mass housing units have not been invested, and they are not adapted to a changing climate. And we see that even in very different locations in the north of Russia, where temperatures go to -30, or in the south of the USSR, where similar mass housing units were built, there was it was not adapted to the climate conditions. You wanted to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. So a massive opportunity, a massive challenge no pun intended, and a massive opportunity. So what were some of the solutions for the regeneration of the mass housing then, and what would be some tangible kind of I guess, whether it would be development approaches or investments, what would that look like? Like, how would we regenerate it to be more climate resilient?
Well, we didn't look at the financial instruments, and we didn't look so much into the policy structures, because our UTC invited people from very different countries. We had 18 people, we had people from 18 different countries who participated in our workshop that we organized, and we had 4 case studies: Brazil, Uzbekistan, Russia, and Germany. And so 40 people worked on those case studies and tried to come up with architectural and urban planning solutions to adapt the existing stock to a changing climate. And we gave them the exercise of, we gave them data on the future climate based on the last IPCC report. So looking at the worst case scenario to make it more, so that they would come up with more, let's say, sharper solutions. And so meaning +4 or 5 degrees change overall, which doesn't mean that it gets warmer everywhere. But, and so some of the solutions, they're very different. But for example, in the arid zone, so in Samarkand, where the climate is already arid, it's going to become even hotter, more hot. One of the solutions was drawing on Middle East vernacular architecture. So there was this Badgear idea that existed in Doha, Qatar, that Eric mentioned in his talk earlier on. And so it's wind mills that help to ventilate the apartments and to make them cooler. And so we see that the mass housing units were all the same, despite very different climates. And the idea was to draw on traditional historic techniques to face and to adapt to harsh climates, and to turn those existing housing units into something more resilient to climate change.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing that. Was there one, you came up with some excellent innovations. Is there one that's already in practice that you can just really briefly tell us a little bit about?
Well, yes, I can. One of our speakers because we had a workshop and then a conference, and in the conference we had a famous French architect, Christophe Hutin, who worked together with Lacaton and Vassal, the 2 architects who won the Pritzker Prize for Architecture this year. And he was part of the team that worked on the renovation of a Grand Parc in Bordeaux, which is a mass housing unit. It's a very bland block of, it's several blocks actually. And their proposal was not to tear down the block as is usually done when when governments don't know what to do with mass housing, but to add a layer, an additional layer. And so the idea was to give more space to people so that they would have more flexibility and more space for themselves, and also create an extended space, which was a winter garden, which makes it, makes the overall apartment more climate efficient. It needs less energy because it's a buffer zone, and it also gives, and with more light. And so this is a project that exists, and it was done, I think 2 or 3 years ago.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing. Very, very interesting and insightful.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to go to the next speaker. I could see how we could just take all the time to ourselves, but we better not do that with all the great contributions that are happening. So the next person, I'd like to welcome Miss Adeline Ferrer with the Planning African Metropolis for Climate Resilience. Are you there, Adeline?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. So I was not part of the program initially because it was Marianne Malaise, my colleague, who was supposed to talk. And unfortunately, she couldn't attend. So I'm here and I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you very much. So I'm mission officer at the French Federation of Urban Planning Agencies and at the Metropolitan and Territorial Planning Agencies Network, working on international affairs.
Well, we're very happy that you're able to be here. That works out excellent. All right, so I was very interested to learn more about sort of the metropolis in Africa in terms of climate change. So the first question is, African cities are growing fast. And in that regard, what are the key challenges for growing metropolises in Africa? And what kind of are some of the ideas that have been generated to help to address that in terms of climate resilience?
So first, to introduce a bit the context, that was one of the output of the campus. So African metropolises are those which are facing one of those who are facing the fastest population growth, urban sprawl, and climate change. In fact, even though the continent doesn't count a huge number of climate events, the more important, the metropolises are one of the most vulnerable in the world. In fact, firstly, because the population growth is rapid and the metropolises have difficulties to settle in good conditions new population. Then with the population growth, it is coupled with urban sprawl, which often is settled in vulnerable areas in the cities, and population are settled in precarious settlements that are more vulnerable to climate change and climate events. And so, and finally, urban sprawl systematically is a compounding factor of climate risks. So, and finally, also, we notice a lack of structure and governance for implementing policies that could allow to take action for climate resilience. Africa is then, for becoming one of the most populated and young continents in the world. And it is so making metropolises resilient is one of the biggest challenges of the century. It is a human, social, and urban challenge. And African metropolises, facing this challenge, can be at the forefront and can use this transition as an opportunity and to be a model in being resilient metropolises. That's all.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that context. So, can you give an example of some of the sort of ideas that have been generated to sort of address some of the challenges that clearly that you've described?
Yeah. So our campus gathered a wide diversity of different actors. So what came out mainly is that it was first necessary to draw an operational and systemic framework that is adapted to the context, and in particular taking into account social and economical matters for planning territorial resilience and implementing climate transition of metropolises. Then we acknowledge that it's necessary to make emerge leadership, mainly most probably embodied by public and local actors. And it implies financial and capacity building through the organization and the structuration of a governance and public services on resilience. And this leadership is essential to identify and gather in an environment that enables a dialogue, all the actors, and share ecosystemic responses to an ecosystemic challenge and risk. And so, and finally, we came out with the fact that it's a key to make all the stakeholders commit to planning resilience and to address climate change impacts for metropolises from national scale to individual scale. So it's essential also to involve citizens and for local authorities and national authorities to support experimentation for project addressing climate change. And from that, we also put out some tools that need to be forward as first one to couple urban planning and design planning and urban design, sorry, which is necessary to couple together for resilience. Then to activate financial levers that are directed toward climate resilience investments and projects. And finally, to not forget evaluations and reporting tools in order to address climate change in a long-term approach.
Excellent, thank you. So we just probably need to wrap up here, but I just want to ask, have you seen or did you hear in your Thinkers Campus examples where that's already been implemented? Just some of those solutions, and you could share with us today that we could note for the record.
Yeah, so one of the projects I think has been one of the most significant during the campus was a project implemented by Kinshasa in Democratic Republic of Congo. In fact, Kinshasa, firstly, is one of the most populated and biggest metropolis in the continent, with 15 million of inhabitants in 2020. So this area is facing basically all of the challenge I talked before, growing population, which is mainly settled in informal housing, vulnerabilities to climate change events like flooding or drought and so on. And thanks to a strong political awareness and ambition for making the megapolis resilience to climate change events, they implemented a project which is called Kin Elanda, supported by the World Bank. And this project is focusing on planning resilience and and they focus also on precarious settlements through resilience infrastructures. And despite that concrete application of that project, I think the launching and implementation of this project helped putting at the center of the megapole strategy development climate resilience, and thanks to that they managed to create opportunities, financial opportunities, in order to strengthen also their services and their infrastructure. So it's like a virtuous cycle that is created. And in this ambition, in more, Kinshasa opened a municipal section dedicated to the implementation of this project, creating also an environment for dialogue, for gathering different actors that are stakeholders that are implicated in climate change planning. And so this the voluntarist approach helped to build a strong vision for the development of the metropolis, which acknowledged the need to address these challenges for resilient cities.
All right. And I almost wonder, I don't want to cut you off, but I do feel I know there's quite a few people. So maybe if there's time, we can come back. Did you want to just in 30 seconds wrap up any last points on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to also talk about another initiative that I found very interesting, which was in France. There is a status that has been developed by at the national level for private sectors, for being companies of mission. And it's very interesting in the sense that a company of mission has to integrate in its strategies social, societal, and environmental objectives that are in cooperation with a national strategy. So that help private sector to participate to challenges, to common challenges like resilience. That's all.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. I hope you've got good notes. It looks like you do. So those will be shared as well. So, all right. And I know, appreciate your input. We're going to go now to Mr. Pedro Heinrich Campello Torres. And I know Pedro was having some difficulty, so I'm not sure if you're there now. But if you are, please join us. And if you're not, that will conclude panel 2. And I apologize to the moderators if we went a little over. And if we do have time for questions, let me know and we'll facilitate a few questions. Okay, I'm not seeing Pedro, unfortunately did message me earlier, said having technical difficulties. So I think I'm turning it over to Sandeep now for if it's panel 3, and unless there's any other opportunity for some questions. Sandeep.
Thank you, and wonderful panel.
Yeah.
Lots of learning. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you others speakers. Very honored. Wonderful to listen to you. We will probably have some time in the end, perhaps. I hope so. But I now take this opportunity to take us to the panel 3 after the A and B of the panel 2, which was so wonderfully moderated by Kelly. Panel 3 is on guiding climate action. Very briefly from me, as has been said, friends, while we remember history, we should learn from history. We should escape from the prisons of the past if we have to build new sustainable futures in the urban context. And the city we need frames it very well in the kind of city lives we need, which are sustainable, sustainable for lives, sustainable for livelihoods, sustainable in terms of resource optimization, sustainable in terms of resource reuse, waste management, sustainable in terms of climate futures, inclusive climate futures. I add the word inclusive. We had heard some talk about mass housing, for instance, social housing, for instance, urban commons in the last session. Wonderful, those ideas. Friends, we also know there are 3 challenges facing the cities. One, of course, is financing for climate adaptation and climate resilience, which has been at the center of the global COP26 debate, has always been the case. There's quibbling about how much money, whether it reaches the cities, the question of urban governance. We also know that there's inadequate planning for adaptation, inadequate adaptation planning and implementation. We also know that resilience also means mitigation, and mitigation means essentially those who contribute the least and suffer the most, whether in rural context or whether in urban context. So within these 3, it's very clear to us, and I don't think every child knows, that the cities of today aren't what we wish them to be on several fronts. Needless to say, there has been progress. There have been solutions in the past 5 years, ever since we have the new urban agenda. The UN Secretary General will be releasing his quadrennial report next year, and we'll certainly find a key timeline of progressions. We know this is goal 11 of the SDGs, but also the goal 13 in terms of climate action within this decade of action. So in that context, and being brief of this, we are locating this panel 3. We have an august lineup of speakers who will be speaking to futuristic solutions and experiences. I will have the honor and the privilege now to invite colleagues and speakers at the panel. My apologies at the outset. We have limited time, and we know you have great thoughts. My apologies that I'll be sort of looking at about 4 to 5 minutes per speaker. We have 5 August speakers. At this time, we'll have questions, but I can't assure at the moment, sir and madams. At this moment, may I invite our first speaker? I saw him here. So the honored Pablo Francisco Gonzalez. Pablo is the director of CJUR, but also the president of the College of Urban Jurisprudence. 25 years of experience on urban law, particularly environmental law, but as well as other aspects of climate law. And Pablo, may I invite you to visualize yourself if you're listening us, and say a line or so which I have missed telling about you, which you think is most dear to your introduction.
Yes, I'm here, Sandeep. Thank you so much.
Hi, Pablo.
Okay. Greetings from Mexico City. Thank you, Sandeep. I would share with you some reflections made during the celebration of our Urban Thinkers Campus about urban legislation and climate change in Latin America with the participation of 10 countries. In Latin America, there is still no real interaction between urban legislation and climate change. Legislation of climate change is separated from the urban legislation, and the climate change is legally regulated as follows in constitutional reference to the environment, approval or ratification of international treaties by each country, and some specific aspects are regulated in environmental laws or laws that regulate the activity of the competent ministries in environmental matters. The matter is regulated by national policy decrees or climate change strategies, or it is addressed through the issuance of specific laws on climate change, or urban laws in some cases mention something about climate change, but they do not connect or systematize urbanism and climate change. In conclusion, in Latin America, there is no real and effective connection between urban legislation, environmental legislation, and a vision of climate change, risk prevention, and a warranting approach to human rights.
Thank you. May I lead on from that question and ask your quick reflections on which are the main areas you think where urban legislation can actually be useful for addressing the climate question within cities? Some main areas where you think, from your experience, the urban legislation could be very useful in addressing climate change challenges within the cities in your context.
Yes, we think the most important areas is to widely develop specific regulations on prevention, mitigation, and adaptation to climate change in national and subnational urban legislation. So it's the connection between urban legislation with the contents of climate change and prevention of risks. And in the second area, most important, is to prepare construction and land use regulation with architectural design elements for climate change.
Are there any good examples or upcoming examples that you feel or see where such legislation?
Yes, about this point in Latin America, we have the advantage that there is a strong,
So are there any examples that you have sort of noticed, or would you like to give us, share with the panel here?
Yes, about this point in Latin America, we have the advantage that there is a strong system of international agreements related to climate change to support urban legislation, regulations, urban plans, and policies. For example, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement, the Climate Action Summit, and of course, the New Urban Agenda. However, we can see the development of legislation on climate change in Latin America is asymmetric. There is only legislation on this specific matter in Guatemala, Honduras, Paraguay, Peru, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, and a very good legislation in Mexico. However, Ecuador, El Salvador, Panama, Uruguay, Bolivia, Chile, and Cuba has not yet issued legislation on climate change.
That's wonderful. Just to touch base with you lastly, and I would ask you, where do you think some future areas, more specifically, my mind goes to what I see here in my context, that there's overuse of water and in cities, and there's no legislation to prevent it. We keep on drawing down water. There's no legislation to regulate urban commons. And we see degradation of urban commons and green lungs of the cities, things like that, micro examples like that. Would you like to say some reflections on where you think key action points could be for activists, for ground civil society formations, for local governance experts who are here?
For example, as a result of our Urban Thinkers Campus, we have proposed for Latin America 5 points of creation or action in urban legislation and climate change points. The first one is to legally regulate the preparation of urban development plans and urban design that consider the effects of climate change and disaster prevention. The second one is to incorporate in the urban impact studies and in the procedures for the issuance of urbanization or construction permits, analysis of prevention, mitigation, and adaptation of climatic impacts. The third one is widely develop specific regulations on prevention and adaptation to climate change in national urban legislation, and legally regulate the preparation of urban development plans and urban design that consider the effects of climate change and disaster prevention, and finally develop and specify in urban legislation and regulations the human rights associated with climate change, the protection of life, the environment, health, water, housing, and the right to the sea.
Just in the end, and thank you, lovely to hear you on this, but just a quick reflection from you in a few words. Where do you see the future of the right to the city from the perspective of the majorities of the city?
Yes, we are now working with Young Habitat and the World Urban Campaign in 3 main points. The first one is to create a new legal urbanism focus in the human rights, right to the city, that we must concrete in legislation, regulation, urban planning, and urban design. This is a very big challenge, but we are working now in 3 countries in Latin America to achieve that.
Thank you, Pablo. And
thank you, Sandeep.
It's only for limitations of time. It's very engaging, your experiences, but thank you. We'll come back to you if there's time. And may I now invite Analia Praston, Miss Analia Praston, if she's here from Argentina and globally as well. Analia, if you're here, please unmute and please visibilize yourself. She is the CEO and the founder of Smartly Social Entrepreneurship Institute on the SDGs and the co-chair of the professional group of the World Urban Steering Committee within the World Urban Campaign. Analia, may I invite you to say a few words about yourself, and then I will ask you a few things. Welcome.
Hi, Sandeep. It's a real pleasure for me being here with Smartly in this amazing conference. We are so honored. From Smartly, we work in localizing and communicating the Sustainable Development Goals in the public sector, parliaments, civil society, academia, and during this conference, we are going to share our experience with the Urban Thinkers Campus on climate change. So it's a real honor.
So like Pablo, who organized Urban Thinkers Campus on urban legislation for climate change, you've also recently organized Urban Thinkers Campus. Would you tell us something about it in terms of where you see your focus was, what major lessons came out very quickly?
Of course. We've been developing different UTCs with parliaments, with universities, and because we want to share what is the role of the university regarding doing research, data on climate change, preparing the leaders that we need in each community to go through all these challenges that we have, like climate change, the economic recovery post-pandemic. So, and also the role of legislation on this, how the local parliamentarians have the important role to legislate on the SDGs. We have legislation in beekeeping, in sustainable tourism, and concrete legislation actions that we are working in the region, in Argentina, Ecuador, Panama, Mexico. So we are glad to work with the legislative level and the academia as well, connecting both spheres and trying to solve this urgent actions that we need to mitigate and adapt the climate to climate action. So regarding that, we've been doing in these UTCs, we were trying to connect those organizations, those parliamentarians, those professors in the universities that they're already working on climate change, but perhaps they are not working together. So these UTCs are the wonderful opportunity to connect them, to try to boost their actions and to think more local, globally, locally. So that's the thing that we were doing our main effort in the region.
You see, I mean, it's very refreshing to hear about your UTC on the university and the city. The word itself is very compelling. It keeps everybody thinking. From the actions you were just saying, some of the actions and solutions which you were discussing within the UTC, what were taken forward, and if there were, I won't call it impacts because that takes time, but what were some of the main results, if there were, coming out of this discussions, of any practical results that you may have noticed in the making, if not concluded?
Well, for example, we have the opportunity to know the work of a community that is urbanizing a quarry. Remember that a quarry is a huge scar in a city that separates and divides the community. So this neighborhood, they have the responsibility, and they took the responsibility to readapt that quarry and make it make the urbanization planning. They work with the urban planning experts, the local authorities, the municipality, the schools in the area, and right now they are urbanizing this space, this quarry, making it more sustainable, more safety for the community. So we were touched for this project because this is in this quarry, this urban quarry is in La Plata in Argentina, and the high school students that they share this work, they share their ideas, their proposal to this neighborhood, and how are they, those students are females, and they were very empowered in terms of how to connect to their own community where they are embedded. So I think that we have youth, we have active role in terms of their own community on climate change regarding this quarry, readapting this quarry, trying to not having that scar, something separate, trying to readapt that and connecting that space to their own community. And that, I think that we would like to share specifically that action, that I think that when you open your eyes and you see that all of us, if you raise your voice, you can be you can touch the power of local authorities, you can touch all the stakeholders. I think that's the main action that these young students share with us. And also we have another example of urban legislation regarding sustainable tourism with the municipality of Mar del Plata, and where we were working with the local parliamentarians, incorporating the sustainable development goals in that legislation for readapting and for the economic reactivation post-pandemic in this industry. So I would like to share both examples with you.
Thank you. You know, you mentioned about, I'm going a little off track, but very quickly, it's pretty inspiring. And you mentioned about the role of young urban women in shaping the futures of the city. Very interesting. And I think that's one important leg of future in terms of a climate resilient city. Do you see any feminist interpretation of what might be a climate resilient city? Any top line talks that the young urban women were doing?
Well, yes, I think that women are more, in some way, aware in terms of climate action. They are trying to share and to boost their communities in a different way. They're very aware of in terms of the nature and the kind of connection that we need to get with Mother Earth. And I think that's something that from females we have to share more and raise our voice and connect to each other, and having this kind of networks as well, sharing experiences, best practices. And I would like to share with you, like in the first session, Ben said, one word: partnerships. I think that right now we need global solutions. We need to, not only an individual solution is going to solve this climate crisis, and we need to work together. So I think SDG 17 is more than ever our main goal, to work and embrace and work together.
Thank you, Analia. I have much more to speak with you. We connected in many, many such forums. Lovely to have you here, and thank you. And now I have Be here with us, if there's time in the end, hopefully. But now I have the pleasure, and I can see Milena already here. I have the pleasure and honor of inviting Miss Milena Ivkovic. She is Dutch-Serbian. She is a senior advisor to ISOCARP, the Institute of Planners. She's a professional with lots of years of experience in public space design and participatory planning of public space processes. A public speaker as well. And I know it's going to be hard to stop you, Milena. But would you like to begin by introducing something I haven't, and something that you would want to share with the guests today about yourself? And then I'll move over to one or two questions that I have for you.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you for this beautiful introduction. And before I start, I would just like to congratulate to the whole team of the World Urban Campaign, to all the chairs and the co-chairs for organizing and staging this wonderful event on the COP26 learning event. As you already introduced me, I am helping ISOCARP Institute as an advisor, and I'm also the CEO of the Placemaking Western Balkans Association, which is based in Belgrade in Serbia. That's where I am right now. And of course, I am also working in the Netherlands as well as a civic participation expert and public space designer, as well as a web developer. So that's a very broad spectrum of work that I do. Let me share some thoughts on the questions about the action, the research action, the need for research action and evidence-based planning, and also to connect it a little bit about capacity building. There is still an UTC going on these weeks about more about how the curriculum of planning schools is going to be changed. So I'm not going to comment on that because it's still ongoing, and I invite you all to join those UTCs in these coming weeks. I would like to touch upon some of the results and some of the ideas that were generated from the two UTCs that I have been doing together with ISOCARP Institute. And that's the UTC on localizing climate action together with City of Mannheim, and UTC on massive housing change. In terms of what do we need, in terms of how do we educate, how do we make this capacity building for future actions, I think it's very important that many of the speakers has already pointed out, it's a collaboration. It's a way of thinking out of the box, and it's a way of making new partnerships. We know that schools of planning around the world are busy with changing their curriculum. But for instance, from the experience that I had with guiding the Strelka KB workshop of massive housing, when we had a lot of young planning professionals and let's say early career designers, it is so important to give them a capacity building which gives experience of what it is to live in a city, of what it is to work with communities, and how actually to deal with civic participation. And those skills can be gained only through the action research on the ground. And I know that a lot of people here in the room, virtual room, know me from the placemaking movement. And placemaking movement is just one of those wonderful tools and methods that connects the local communities with the action in a space, solving climate urgencies which are happening in public space and experienced by everyday use, connecting those actions with academia and with municipalities. And to conclude this, I would like to kind of recommend to really look at the results and the toolboxes that were presented during the local action UTC with the city of Mannheim, because I think they will give also great answer of what is the role of cities for the capacity building in the realm of action research. And that's my reflection on these two great UTCs that happened during the last months.
I can't but resist to challenge you a bit, because I know if your experience and to bring it out. You see, this is exactly the point that you mentioned about placemaking, of connecting community solutions and leadership with planning, with professionals and with municipalities. And I think this is a big problem because urban professionals I've seen across are a world of their own. I don't mean any indications here, but in the developing South and in the North as well, there are two worlds. There's the world of planners, professionals, and then there's the world of poor people. And you mentioned this important point, the makers of the city, we call them, the sustainers of the city, we call them. So how do you see this contradiction? Is education a good way? Are there other, you mentioned about placemaking. So some reflections would be very useful for many of us who are struggling with this.
Yes, I can imagine that it is a struggle because it's still quite a lot of closed silos that work next to each other instead of working together. I think there our colleague at the beginning of this panel already pointed out the need to change the legislation. That's a very important thing because that it will give much more clear framework for the local communities to kind of legalize and kind of, recognize the effort they're doing, but also let's say the non-governmental sector working with these local communities to kind of legalize or enforce what they're doing in the cities. And then let's say the planners will come along because they have to work with them legally, so that's a very important thing to really look at the legislation. Let's say it's a hard measure, but it's needed. Another measure, which is a more soft measure, it's not so much a measure, it's a method approach. What we have seen and pointed out in the UTC with Strelka KB on massive housing is the need to change the planning standards and to change the whole approach to design process. And that's been a roadblock for many of my colleagues, urban planners, really honestly wanting to work with communities more, understanding the value of co-design with the communities, but not being able to actually produce professional design based on those inputs because standards are still old or not adapted, not flexible to the climate adaptation, or not being in a legal framework. And I think that's on those two fields we need to work to enable this collaboration between the planners and the local communities. I think it's quite important.
Wonderful that. I see a lot of challenge when indigenous communities designs to what could be housing or what could be spaces of living, be it urban or not, how they get incorporated into the urban design, sustainable design. And I see it's important. Any quick reflections in the end?
Well, the quick reflections at the end is just let's focus on how do we educate and how do we work with young planners and designers, because they're much more closer to the communities than we think of. They're also much more eager to work with communities than, let's say, the older generations of urban planners. So those groups are really the forces who I foresee will also work on changing the standards and changing the legislation and also changing this modus operandi and thinking more in terms of co-design rather than just one designer, one planner deciding on all. So that would be a closing remark.
Wonderful.
Let's work with youth more.
Yes, I completely
and young
concur.
designers. They're really full of ideas.
And young urban women designers, as Analia was saying.
That's absolutely something that it's much more needed. Yes.
Thank you, and we
Thank
continue
you.
this. And in this line of discussion, I have the honor of now inviting Vincent Goodstadt. Vincent, are you there? Mr. Vincent, if I'm not pronouncing your name, my apologies, Vincent Goodstadt. Okay, I think Vincent may be having, let me just check if he sent a message. He may be having difficulty. Hey, Vincent, if you're there, Vincent, please.
Not too bad.
I honor, Vincent is the honorary president of the European Council of Special Planners. And they've been organizing UTCs, and Vincent has deep, long experience. But to begin with, Vincent, may you want to say a few lines about yourself, since deep, rich experience. I have not captured it well. So may I request you to say something which you think people here should know about yourself. Vincent? I'm not sure if Mr. Vincent is here or he can hear us. So maybe we'll come back to him. So may I now go to Leandra. Leandra, are you there? Leandra Gonzalez?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Leandra.
Hi.
I was hoping you'll be here, and we'll have time to also go back to Vincent. So Leandra is from the Federal University of Sao Paulo. We know it's a very, very prestigious university in Brazil. One of the universities which I'm sure is under some duress at this moment, given that it used to be a public university. And Leandra, may I request you to speak a few things about yourself? They've just organized a UTC on what we were discussing earlier, what they call female approaches to climate action. And it's interesting, we are continuing this discussion from also an academician perspective, but also a ground perspective. So Leandra, a few lines about yourself, and then we ask you of what it means of a female perspective to climate action.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It has been very productive discussions, and I have already learned a lot. I am assistant professor at the Federal University of São Paulo at the Institute of Marine Science. So most of my work interacts with the ocean, marine environment, and public policies, which include also the work of women. And I have explored this in my research work, but also in terms of public engagement, because we have seen many coastal communities, fisher women that have been facing the impact of climate change in their daily life. So that's what I have been looking at most recently, how those women are facing and are finding ways to survive the climate change impacts in the coastal zones.
So may I ask you something which many want to know actually. What do you think is the way women can make substantive difference to climate change in terms of positive climate action? Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I would say that women already contribute to put a hold on the climate crisis, even though they are barely recognized for doing so. Even in crises and situations of scarcity, women lead and promote concrete action that improve life quality and protect the climate. The women I have been working here in Brazil, they fight for rights, they maintain traditional knowledge and many others roles they have in the community. So the organizations of indigenous women, quilombolas, rural women, and traditional communities, they have promoted advances in terms of democracy, rights, and public policies. So I have worked with one specific community of fisher women, and the way they find, the best way they found to face the climate crisis is through their networks. So they have created networks of fisher women, and inside of the network, they start to discuss how to react to climate change. And it's at the early of their work, but they have felt very empowered.
you see some impacts coming out, is what you're saying, even though it's early years. Do you see lasting? I mean, there's also this other, let me be blunt on this, and there's always this thing, and I concur with what you say, but there's always this thing that years of exposure to accumulation, transitions of economies, capitalist wealth, the idea of women being the rescuers of climate and the propellers of future is very good, but maybe it has also got corrupted with the kind of consumerism and civilization we have built. So they are not immune to that. The desires of individual property, the desires of accumulations. How do you sort of look at that? Sorry, it's a bit outside of a city thing, but it has an impact. Just your personal experience and views.
Yeah, what I have, well, the pandemic has impacted a little bit the work to be within and follow up their way of life. But of course, they wish all those stuff, because at this moment they are living in a situation that they have less than anything. The fisherwomen I have been working on, they don't have sometimes even a house. Yeah. Or sometimes they go to fish, to catch fish, to sell and have their food and to buy their stuff, and their boat comes back to land with more garbage than fish or shrimp. So the way they are striving, it's very serious. So if they, I wouldn't blame them for just wish to have a house or to buy stuff that it could be a little bit of consume, but they are beyond, they are really under that. So they need to, first of all, they need to have at least a quality of life that at the moment they don't.
Absolutely, and we all concur with that. But this is often the critique, sort of heaped by patriarchs of the cities onto the women of the cities, who are trying to even basically survive lives. So, what would be your key recommendations? You've run a UTC just now, Urban Thinkers Campus. Some top line recommendations that you have for climate resilient cities?
Yeah, what I think, well, at least from my perspective, as I am in the university, I guess the way to work with this and to help women to face climate change is the transdisciplinarity. And I guess in this panel we have good examples of it. So the way science works with the managers, the way scientists work with the fisherwomen, the way scientists are working with the communities is the way to exchange knowledge. So the experience we have been having here, it's the scientists can share what they know about the impacts of climate change. The fisherwomen can share with us what they are facing in their daily lives, and together we can find solution. In our meetings, we normally invite the local managers to be part of it, so we can subsidize public policies as well. So I really believe the way we have to invest to change and transform this situation is the transdisciplinarity and the co-design of the public policies. I guess we are on this way, and we have had positive feedbacks from the community and from the managers as well.
I hope the progressive, or whichever the city council in Sao Paulo is listening, and I hope they also learn from the examples of Recife and others where participatory planning was going on in the urban. And I think Brazil has been quite a leader in the idea of participatory budgeting and planning within the city context. So any quick final words from you?
I just would say that we still have a very big challenge ahead of us when we talk about climate change. We are just watching COP26 now, and like the ocean and coastal marine affairs are really not well covered yet. When we talk about climate change in Brazil, it's always about forests and net zero, but ocean plays a really big role. So we still have to talk about that when we talk about climate change. So let's keep in our mind that ocean contributes with 1 in 2 breath we take in this world. So let's connect ocean and climate and the communities that live on it.
Wonderful, Dr. Leandra, and I concur. All we hear is Amazon when it comes to climate change, and you extended our thinking into oceans, connection with cities, residents of cities who live life from oceans and their livelihoods and lives. Wonderful to hear that. I want to check, thank you, be with us. I want to check if Dr. Vincent Goodstadt is back. Vincent? Okay, maybe he's not able to join in. Apologies. We're all very keen to listen from the idea of continuing the idea what was mentioned by Milena, the idea of planners with Vincent, but he's not here. My apologies. He couldn't connect. Friends, comrades, colleagues, honorable speakers, contributors, and experiential people, we won't be able to have time. My apologies for question and answer. If there are questions, those who are watching on Facebook Live or here, please type them on the chat box. We can promise you that we'll come back. Please point the name of the speaker. Please type them. We'll come back to you with interaction with them, written interaction with them. I can take that liberty on behalf of all our August speakers, since we don't have time for physical question and answers at the moment. And with this, I once again take this opportunity to thank all the panelists. We wanted to continue endlessly those important continued discussions. So be with us. And may I now turn it over for the panel 4 to my co-chair and colleague, Sri Husnaini Sofjan. Husnaini, you are requested to please take over to moderate the last panel for the day, and apologies if I have continued to run the tradition of overrunning time. And thank you to all speakers once again.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandeep.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. We move from the panel on guiding climate action now to addressing vulnerability. Yeah, this is the 4th panel. My name is Sri Husnaini Sofjan. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Walaban Campaign Steering Committee, and I'm also part of the Huairu Commission, a global network that work with grassroots women. I did not introduce myself at the beginning of the session just now. So panel 4, yeah, when we talk about the city we need that leave no one and no place behind, and we recognize that climate change is actually a poverty multiplier. Now, when we talk about vulnerability now, at this moment, it's not only the climate change, but how also the pandemic has actually multiplied and put the pressure on climate change to the communities, to people who live in cities. The challenge of climate change actually places the poor and marginalized group at the very heart of climate plan, strategies, and action. But we also hear just now that many of the legislation has not actually accommodate this, putting people who are working together and giving that platform. Yeah, the city we need protects the most at risk by preventing dangerous events where feasible. It gives opportunity to actually prepare and protect them before, during, and after the event. When we look at vulnerability, we always need to think also what opportunity opens with that. How we take that opportunity to empower people. Yeah. So for this session, we have 5 speakers who have organized different UTCs in the past one year, and also before, even though their UTCs before this year may not directly talk about climate change, but they talk about building resilience at different level. Yeah, so we have very eminent and experienced speakers. So let me start with the first speaker, Ms. Elsa Maria de Silva founder of Red Dot Foundation. Miss Elsa has organized several UTCs, and the last one is on resilient and safe communities. So Elsa, please introduce yourself, and then I will, come up with the question to start our discussion. Yeah, Elsa.
Thank you, Shri. And I've been so amazed with all the learnings from the previous UTCs. Good evening, everyone. My name is Elsa Marie De Silva. I'm based out of Mumbai, India, and I'm the founder of Red Dot Foundation. Our work is focused on gender equality and justice, and I've been a proud convener of the UTC since the last 4 years.
So, Elsa, your focus in the last 1.5 years actually on resilience and safety. Yeah. So my first question to you, could you explain the relationship between the two, resilient and safety, and how can safety and resilience support each other?
Yes, thanks for asking this important question. So when you think of resilience, it means the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and also build your inner toughness. And safety, on the other hand, is a basic need. Think of the Abraham Maslow pyramid. And if you don't have safety or are threatened by the lack of it, it affects your ability to be resilient. So when you think of our Urban Thinkers campus, and in the past, we've hosted one on resilient cities as well. It has focused on understanding the intersection of gender and climate resilience. So on day one of this year's UTC, we deep dived into gender and mobility. And on day 2, we deep dived into gender, water, waste management, and sanitation. And I think you can't think of safety without resilience and resilience without safety. So through the 2 days, we showcased many interventions and solutions by government, private sector, development professionals, and also entrepreneurs who were addressing one or both areas. And if you don't understand the lived realities of women and girls who comprise 50% of the population, and you don't include their needs into the planning, decision making, and execution of policies, then how will you build resilience into your city? And to give you a quick example, think about mobility. So restricted mobility of women leads to foregoing work opportunities. And this is primarily due to the lack of a safe and efficient public transport system or safe public spaces. And this further impacts women's education, livelihood opportunities, because they are dependent on them being in the public domain. And then you can think about public spaces, which was spoken about earlier, the lack of pedestrian infrastructure, street lighting, public toilets, caregiving facilities, and public transportation, and so on and so forth. So it is very important to ensure women's voices, experiences, and opinions are well represented across the decision-making levels, and evidence-based data must be incorporated.
Yeah, so you gave some examples. So how do you sustain this initiative? How do you make sure that, this is incorporated as part of, a sustainable plan, a sustainable, it is a standard, because sustaining something is making it into a standard. And we heard just now in the previous session also, the challenge of changing the standard. Yeah. What has been your experience on that? And also, what are the main recommendation from your campus?
So our campus focused on solutions and really things that have been working on the ground. So one is public-private civil society partnership. And one great example in our UTC was by the Kochi Metro Rail, where they partnered with a local organization called Kadamba Shri, and they recruited over 600 women and 12 transgender people in the maintenance of the metro railway stations. So, if you don't see her, you can't be her. Another example was employment. So all of this is also employment and livelihood skills, right? And they should be across the spectrum, not just at the lower level, but also in leadership. And we had the Western Railways, which gave an example, and Western Railways carries about 14 million people per day in Bombay. So we have examples of stations being managed by an all-women team. So when you see her, you can be her. Also, then my own intervention, Safe City, which crowd maps sexual and gender-based violence anonymously, that data set can be used as a decision-making tool with local bodies like police, civic authorities, or transport officials, but also engaging the community and giving them a voice. And that also came up very strongly in Pani Haq Samiti and Koro's solutions, where they brought in local women to highlight the problem, and they use things like social media for advocacy and for change within their community. So some of the recommendations that our campus had was, one is to actively engage with gender disaggregated data in assessing the nature of the problem and designing creative solutions to it, and going beyond the gender and the binary to integrate intersectionality, whether it's age, ability, disability, caste, religion, and so on and so forth, so that you have evidence that is useful for policymakers to act upon. Second is build capacities of individuals and give them a voice, bring them to the table. And we've spoken about this earlier as well, Shri, that, youth, for example, are a great constituency to take action. And we have always, parallel to our UTC, hosted a Youth Innovation Challenge where the same topic of the UTC is the challenge, and they have to submit ideas. And this year we had 12 ideas that went through a 3-month incubator and were developed into working prototypes where they engaged their community and came up with very simple solutions that they can take on the topic of the gender and climate justice, which was the topic of our UTC. And finally, I would say that every action plan should be beneficiary centered with a gender lens, so that you can have active participation and involvement in the process from the very beginning.
Thank you very much. I think, Elsa, you must document this practices and innovation, and how also you work with the authorities to institutionalize them, because I think, like you mentioned, the innovation and the solution that your organization work with the communities, with the different local authorities, are inspiration for others. And peer exchange of communities, of local authorities, I think is important to build resilience, to overcome vulnerabilities. Thank you very much, Elsa. We'll come back to you later for hopefully some time for question and answer as well. Yeah. Let's move to our second speaker. Our second speaker, Jane Anyongo from Polycom Development, based in Nairobi, Kenya. Polycom is also a member of the Huairou Commission, and Polycom is one of the active organizations that have been organizing UTCs from the beginning. And in the past 1 year, they have organized one with the team Resilient by Women in Kenya. So Jane, introduce yourself, and then I'll come to some questions, a short introduction of yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shri, and good evening, good morning. This is Jane Anyango, and this time I'm not in Nairobi, I'm away somewhere in Homa Bay County, and I'm so happy to be here today. We are a women empowerment and girl child welfare organization based in Kibera slums. We give women and girls from the informal settlements a voice to unite and to put together their voices and influence change on issues that affect their lives. And definitely climate action is one of them. So climate change is one of them. So I'm very happy to be part of this conversation today.
Thank you, Jane, for your introduction of yourself and the work that you do. So you recently organized this UTC focus on resilient by women for the community. Yeah. So in what way do you think that women are particularly resilient while facing climate change? I think, this is also related to some of the points that Elsa earlier mentioned. Yeah. So Jane, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shri. So this was our 6th Urban Thinkers Campus, and it is this time that we are talking about climate change. All this time we have been looking at the city we need is safe. And I'm so happy to speak after our Elsa, whom we've been working very closely with. And the innovation of Safe City is something that we've been able to adapt and come up with a report on how we can ensure that our communities are safe. So this time around, we had a physical urban thinkers campus in a place called Roland Camp in Nairobi, Kenya. And the reason why we chose this space is that it is a small forest. It was about connecting with nature, getting people to understand that it is possible, it is still very possible to plant trees and just to conserve our environments. Ahead of the urban thinkers, the main urban thinkers campus, we had community events. We called it Women Claiming Their Neighborhoods. So it was about women identifying a space within their neighborhood, cleaning it up and bringing in people to understand that, you know, we need all these spaces. We need the spaces, the safe spaces where we can always meet and plan, especially now that we are talking about climate change. It is affecting everybody and nobody is running away from it. So we must have spaces within the communities where we are able to get together and discuss. What has been very successful with the Urban Thinkers campuses that we have had is that it has been women-led. It has been community women bringing people together to talk about the successful programs that they have out there, what has worked and what has not worked. So this time around, we were able to bring experts on climate change, people who are taking different actions to tell us what they have been doing, what is working well. We had women, a woman, her organization is called Mazingira. She's able to plant over 500 fruit trees within Kibera. We had people who are recycling, doing recycling work. And as an organization with a support from Wairo Commission, we have been able to establish, we call them learning gardens, where people are able to learn how they are able to preserve their food, how they are able to use the small spaces they have to be able to produce their food, and still to bring different people together to discuss, to plan and monitor what is happening. We call them academies and assemblies, where people are, everybody come together to work, to plan and organize how they are moving forward.
Yeah, what are the main recommendations that comes from your UTC, the most recent UTC, and why is it important to actually emphasize that, you know, grassroots women who are living in poor communities are also contributing and has a role in overcoming climate change and building resilience at their community?
Yeah, thanks, Shri. What happens is that the women living in informal settlements in Kenya are more than 60% of all women living in urban settlements. And by not involving them in any conversation, it means that we are leaving them behind, and it means that we are not going to have any change. And these are women who adapt. Sorry about that. Can I?
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I have to move a bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm really sorry about that. Yeah,
Okay.
so these are women who must just come up with ideas on how to make things better for them. So some of the recommendations that came out in our UTC is that we must have collective approach towards the climate actions. And that climate justice is not something that should be begged for. It is a human right. And all of us must just make sure that we are able to unpackage the different components of climate action. We talked about the government being able to map the losses and damages and working towards compensation, having clear database that should spell out what everybody is going, what people have been able to experience, and just see how we can work together towards ensuring that we have climate justice for everybody. I'm really sorry about that. I'm in a very noisy environment. Sorry.
No, I think we don't hear the background, but this is also adaptation.
To challenges, yeah? Yes, it's about adaptation.
You
Yeah.
mentioned about database, and Elsa earlier also mentioned the importance of data, disaggregated data, and having that. And you mentioned the percentage of women and all that. Those are part of the data. And how do you? How do you see community mapping actually contribute to addressing vulnerability and empowering those? How do you get the authorities to recognize this data?
Yeah, it's only within communities that you can get real data where you don't have those assumptions. In fact, at times I say we have the law and we have reality. We have research and then we have reality. So it's only from the community that you are able to get the reality. So like us, we have been able to compile our data and to work with the authorities to launch the reports that we have. And then we use different platforms to disseminate our reports. And as I mentioned before, is that we also monitor who is doing to bring change in the community. So, you know, by leaving the majority behind, not having their data, not listening to what is contained in the community generated data, it means that we are not really acting on reality. And it's only within the community that you can measure the impact of every project that is being implemented.
Thank you, Jane. I think you mentioned the recommendation and the importance of data and community-driven data.
Yes.
So these are some of the important points that we can link also to panel one. Local communities setting their priorities. Yeah. Thank you very much, Jane. We'll come back to you when we have time. I'm moving to speaker number 3, who is coming from Mexico, Bufete, Dulce Maria Romo Zuniga. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Bufete is also a member of WUC Commission, and they have organized a regional UTC covering Latin America and the Caribbean. Their focus is socioeconomic rights, yeah, in helping address vulnerability and the challenge of climate change. Yeah, Dulce, are you there?
Hola, buen día. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hola, muy buen día. Saludos desde México. Soy Edeni Rodríguez. Me acompaña también mi compañera Laura Salgado. Una sincera disculpa. Dulce no se pudo presentar. Tuvo un problema con el internet en su comunidad de origen y estaremos participando Laura y una servidora.
So Dulce is not available, and you are Edina Rodriguez. See?
Yes, I'm Oralia Edeni Rodriguez, and it's here too, Laura Salgado.
Okay.
Hi there.
There will be a translation, right? Christine, Edina, you are making the your intervention in Spanish?
Yes, I'm speaking in. Vamos a hablar en nuestra lengua materna ambas.
Do we have a translator? Sorry, I have to clarify this. Christine?
That was not planned. I thought that was clearly in English, but well, it has to be short then. I can a little bit interpret, but it will be very limited interpretation.
Because if we had known, we could also make arrangement for that, but we're not aware that the intervention from Edine or from Bufete is in Spanish. So so introduce yourself, Edine, and a short introduction of yourself, and we'll try, Christine will try to translate that for us who don't speak Spanish. And then I will go to the question for your intervention.
Muy buen día, soy Edeni Rodríguez, integrante del campus de pensadoras urbanas en México. Soy periodista.
And hi there, my name is Laura Salgado. I am psychologist and member of Mira Pensadoras Urbanas campus in National Mexico, Peru.
Okay, so I get it. So Laura is going to translate. Sí, which very good. Okay.
We are going to participate together.
Okay.
I am doing the first part, and then my partner Edeni.
Okay. Thank you, Edeni and Laura. So it's clear now. Yeah. So the Bufete organized the UTC on socioeconomic rights in Latin America. What are the main socioeconomic impacts of climate change? And what are your grassroots organization, the grassroots organization that Bufete work with, are doing or requesting to overcome and face those challenges?
Okay, well, the binational campus addresses the axis of climate change, DRM, city management, financing for the gender equality and inclusion, and participation strategies from the intersectional, intergenerational, and intercultural perspective. Along this path, it has developed initiatives for participation and work with grassroots, women, and communities for the post-disaster recovery stage, raising the importance of strengthening capacities in women leaders, their strategy alliances, and spaces for the dialogue and agreement with authorities at the subnational level, state and federative. From a commitment to civil diplomacy and Latin American cooperation, it has also been promoting all these opportunities on climate change. This July, the binational CPU was part of the organizing group and the event Climate Change and the Rights of the Girls, Boys, Adolescents, Voices from Latin America, which had a central role for children and adolescents from Peru, Guatemala, Salvador, and Mexico to make visible the leadership, the problems, the needs, and the voices of the new generations. This is most important because we have another opportunities to check all these realities from the population and all countries in Latin America. And then we have space to the economic impact of the CC in the LAC economies. And then, we have these participations in these countries and make all the forms that we have another things to deserve or make another changes in this topic.
What are the main recommendations, an example of climate action to address these challenges? And where are they now? How are you sustaining this action?
Well, the diversity of the partners in this Bufete and the campus binational Peru, Mexico, well, advocacy, strategy, and budget proposals on the items dedicated to disaster GR and CC climatic and the government levels from a gender and childhood perspective regarding the PV projects to approve, strengthening of the leadership and coalitions of children and adolescents on Latin American scale to promote communication strategies and joint advocacy on DRM and CC with a gender diversity. All the things that we promote too is about the contribution of all the people and check all the things that the pandemic make it through across the urgently promote safe spaces, comprehensive health and care for the environment. All these things, well, are urgent and we have to make a lot about the changes, and well, this will do in this buffet and Mira Pensadoras Urbanas.
Thank you very much. Laura, Edine, do you have any addition that you want to add? And Laura can help translate maybe?
Yeah, that can do it. Uno de los principales puntos en los cuales se sostienen estrategias de sostenibilidad, particularmente en el trabajo que estamos haciendo en la red latinoamericana, en México y en Perú, tiene muchísimo que ver con la ciudadanía activa. En México efectivamente hay un marco regulatorio claro con el tema de sustentabilidad, pero para que este efectivamente se implemente y para que la política pública tenga un impacto real, no ha sido posible sin la exigencia ciudadana. Tenemos áreas de oportunidad en la aplicación meramente gubernamental y entonces el contar con una ciudadanía activa ha sido el ejemplo que ha permitido mantenerlo, como es los trabajos que hacen las redes de productoras. Y también tenemos ejemplos de estas áreas de oportunidad, que es cuando la política pública se implementa sin respetar el consentimiento de pueblos y comunidades indígenas.
Laura, you want to help translate that, or Christine can help translate that?
If you can help me, Kristen, and I will
just the
write here in the chat.
Sorry, I didn't follow sufficiently to be able to translate exactly what was happening, what was said just now. And it was complex, to be honest, for me.
Oh, okay. I hope that there are participants who are able to understand Spanish to appreciate what Edine contribute to the discussion, to the point that Laura make. Yeah, thank you very much for the team from Bufete UTC on socioeconomic rights in Latin America and the Caribbean. We'll come back to you. If we have time, yeah. Let me move to let us move together to speaker number 4, Ms. Dhanashree Mirajkar, Associate Professor from the DY Patil School of Architecture, who has been leading the UTC on water resilience with the people. Dhanashree?
Yes, hi Shri.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Just a small correction. I'm associated with MIT Edity University School of Architecture, Pune. I was previously associated with DY Patil University. Well, so thank you so much, WUC UTC, for this wonderful opportunity, and congratulations to all. Thank you for very much for this friendly, human, and humble ambience. And yeah, to introduce myself more, I am an architect, academician, and researcher associated with MIT EDTU Pune city of India, and handling the international collaborations of peers. Also, I am chair of work group education and capacity building under Planet for Climate Action. And my study areas are ancient water supply systems, sustainable development, urban design and planning, urban landscape, and disaster management. Yeah, thank you, Sri.
Thank you. So your UTC focus on water resilience, yeah, and the magnitude of the challenges as well as the strategies to build resilience from that perspective.
Okay, yeah, thank you for this wonderful question, Shri. I apologize for my voice. I'm a little down due to fever, but hope I'm audible properly. Well, so to answer the question, yeah, water is indispensable for earth resilience and sustainable development. Water regulate the earth climate, support biomass production, and supply water resources to human societies. Among all the systems, most critically affected are the water systems these days. Drought and flood are the prominent problems which leave an impact on settlements, villages, towns, cities, urban lives with a great magnitude. If we talk about the flood, yeah, notable recorded floods are in 1943, floods of Madras, then bursting of Machu Dam in 1979, Bihar floods which happened in 1987, then in 2015 and 16, South India, Assam, Central and Southern United States were affected due to flooding, and several European countries also affected due to floods in July 2021. Everyone knows that yes, flooding results not only into loss of millions of dollars, but it affects biodiversity, it affects animals, wildlife, and of course, human lives too. On the other hand, what would you do if you ask for a glass of water and you don't get it? Water is vital for life, and scarcity of water will lead to strife, of course, yeah. We have always witnessed that scarcity of water leads to war, famine, mass extinctions, and devastating diseases. Consider the case of Cape Town, South Africa, which recently experienced one of its worst droughts in the history. Global environmental change and climate change impacts are affecting watersheds and water supply systems worldwide. Then cities and communities across the world are facing growing water security risk, more frequent or intense flooding, or increasing stress on eco-hydrological systems such as rivers, wetlands, and groundwater. Yeah, water resilience may include ecological aspects of water quality or flood mitigation, engineer infrastructure to ensure safe and reliable water supply, and through equitable governance of these systems, along with other mitigation strategies which are commonly known. Yeah, nature-based solutions such as mangroves protecting shorelines from storms, lake storing large water supplies, and floodplains absorbing excess water runoff are a key part of flood mitigation strategies, according to me. These natural services perform an infrastructure-like function. Working with this natural infrastructure can optimize the performance as well as financial benefits of engineered infrastructure. To address drought conditions, it is essential to implement more holistic water management by incorporating water recycling, stormwater capture and reuse, using multiple and diverse sources of water like surface water, groundwater, then recharging the water table, reclaiming and recycling water for non-potable uses such as using rainwater for gardening, then for toilet flushing, which in turn requires new infrastructure and regulations to balance public health and other concerns as well. Yeah, so improving water sewage treatment systems, which automatically can decrease the load on water supply system, is one more strategy which can effectively help the water resilience. And the most important is transitioning dialogue into implementation. And yes, a more sustainable approach to combat episodes and drought is to increase soil water storage and the overall green water efficiency of agroforestry and cover crops, which can improve water management relative to annual crop systems. Such practices ensure living roots in agriculture systems throughout the year and offer an approach to agro-ecosystem design that mimics ecological dynamics of native perennial vegetation. Yes, Sri.
Yeah, so you gave example just now, yeah, on the climate action to water resilience. You had given some examples. So now, and you mentioned, dialogue, turning dialogue to action,
Yes.
to implementation. So can you share your recommendations, key recommendation of sustainable traditional water resilient practices which could be adopted in today's context? And how do you actually work with the different constituencies or stakeholders in this context? You have the authorities, you have the community, the people, and also the intersectionality of the people who live in the human settlement in the city.
Yeah, so very firstly, it is very important to make public aware about the sustainable water supply system if those are present in their cities or in their regions. And yes, government should also take care of such systems. If we talk about the traditional and ancient resilience, which could be adopted in today's context, in many states and in many countries, there are ancient water systems which are still existing, like aqueducts of Rome, then canal systems of Iran, 400 years old Nahar systems of Aurangabad city of Maharashtra, and there are many more. So it's very important to make public aware and build the capacity through education of taking care of such system. If I talk about India, there are traditional water systems which were highly sustainable and were evolved in response of geology and geography of the region. In India, the history of water systems and their management goes back a long way, right from water being worshipped for being sacred to making use of water as a decorative element. The history of India is laden with several examples of sophisticated water management systems that prove that ancient India had a profound understanding of hydrology, and this understanding should be inculcated into new generation as well. There are various sustainable water harvesting systems like bamboo pines of eastern Himalayas, gul of western Himalayas, Jabo system, Shio Ujichi system of northern western hills. So all these systems are going along with the geography and geology of the particular region. Like in Thar Desert and in Western India, we can see Kund, then Khadins, Nadis, step wells, which are very famous examples of rainwater harvesting. So all the ancient water supply systems are highly sustainable as they improved the quality of human life in those days while living within the carrying capacity of the ecosystem, which is another important aspect. And they evolved as a direct response to geological and geological conditions of regions, as I told before, and many of them rely on only gravitational force instead of any mechanical force for carrying the water from source to destination. Such systems, if rejuvenated or replicated, could cater the towns without involving any electricity or mechanical forces. And yes, they can save millions of dollars, which are being spent on water system in these days. Yes, Shri.
Yeah. Thank you. I think, you know, there need to be also advocacy and a push to policymakers to look at what works before and can continue to work. Yeah. So thank you very much, Dhanashree, for your intervention, for your sharing based on the UTC that you organize with your team. I would like to now move to our fifth speaker. And please forgive me if I do not pronounce your name correctly. Ms. Domenico Schilassi, a
Domenico
co-founder of
Schilasci.
Sorry?
Domenico Schilasci. Hi, but don't worry.
Okay, and a co-founder of Push,
Yes.
that has organized a UTC on Push and Farm. Yeah, so please introduce your brief introduction of yourself before we go into some of the questions for you.
Yes, absolutely. Good afternoon. Thanks a lot for inviting me and my organization to present our Urban Thinker Campus. My name is Domenico Schilasci. I'm one of the co-founder and director of the Push Design Lab. We're based in Palermo, Sicily, so southern part of Italy, and we try to drive social innovation and sustainability projects in our region, let's say. And I'm going to present the outcomes of the Urban Thinkers Campus that took place a couple of months ago in September in Favara. It's a little town in the inner Sicily that it's very interesting because it suffered from the problems that most of the little towns in the southern part of Europe, I would say, are suffering. So a lack of infrastructures and investment, high level of unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, the population of villages in these inland areas, because most of the people are flowing to greater cities and urban areas. But despite of this little town started a very interesting community-based movement based on creativity and resiliencies that is making this a really reference point for the whole region. And so that's why we decided to host our Urban Thinker Campus here, because there's really a sparkle in Favara, and we'd like to take advantage of this.
So the UTC that you organize focus on farming as a way to build resilience. So, and I hope you will explain how farming can help and the most important path to build resilience. I think this is also connecting into the issue of urban-rural linkages, and farming also, we take note also that farming is not necessarily in the rural area, but in general, farming is in rural areas. So yeah, and I hope you can also give us some example of urban farming that has a large impact on the communities that you work with.
Yeah, actually, we didn't focus the campus on proper urban farming, but we use urban farming as a starting point to discuss about the future development of such areas. As you said, these areas are as an historic heritage of farming places, basically, but now things are changing. And we try to reflect on how innovation can really lead to new projects and new ideas to reshape these cities and this area. In particular, we focused our Urban Thinker Campus on three, let's say, pillars. One was housing practice, second one was good business, and the third was parkifying the future. So how we can use nature to reshape cities, basically. And in particular, the most interesting, in my opinion, which is also connecting to urban farming, is good business, because we reflect on new paradigms of business practices that now are raising in this area, that are trying to intend business not only as with the purpose of generating profit, but something that's also connected with the idea of community and sustainability. So to try to, yeah, of course, generate profit, but to do it to sustainable and slow practices, and with the idea of trying to redistribute the value that is created to the territory, to the local community, to the environment, etc., etc., etc. And this is very interesting. Also because COVID-19 strikes has really changed completely all our lives worldwide, but in particular in this area, something very powerful happened, and it's connected to a movement that is called South Working. Because with the remote working or so-called smart working, a lot of people were forced, of course, to work at home. And so a lot of people that were working and living in the northern part of Italy or in the northern part of Europe for the first time had the chance to come back to their little towns in Sicily, in the southern part of Italy, in other, let's say, peripheral area, and to live there. And a lot of people realized that this led to, except, of course, despite all the restriction due to the COVID-19 crisis, but this really led to an improvement in lifestyle. And this really questioned the previous lifestyle. And so now there is a really strong movement called South Working in the whole Italy that is trying to make companies, institutions, also public authorities reflect about the situation that has been created by COVID-19 that could become a best practice, actually, because in order to fight the population, in order to fight the lack of employment opportunities in this area, South Working could really become something, a game changer in this perspective, that will lead the opportunity to people to work remotely for big companies, for multinationals and so forth, but to stay, live and spend their money in this area. This is something that we highlighted a lot in our Urban Thinker campus, and it's something that we are really following with a lot of interest, because we think it could be something that can really, really have a positive impact for the future of these areas.
Yeah, this is very inspiring, and I think this trend is not only in Sicily. I think, you know, the trend that I've learned also from others is also happening in other countries as a way of, you know, communities and people overcoming the challenges of climate change, the challenges of, you know, reacting or managing the pandemic that we all face together. Yeah. Can you share, you know, before we close this session, can you share the main recommendation of your campus, and what can we learn from that? The things that you know, the innovation that you work with the community in Sicily.
Yes, absolutely. Let's say that the big recommendation that we get from our campus is something that's not rocket science, I would say, because it's really basic, but it's yet interesting, is the necessity to address all the challenges that has been discussed. So housing, business, green areas, etc., not as single topics, but to consider them as components of the same strategy, of the same solution. So in order to be faced by following a common and comprehensive approach, we need to work on common visions that include all the different topics, all the different aspects of cities, of people. I mentioned before, for example, housing and business. We used to consider this as a really separate topic. Then after the pandemic, most of the people for a year and a half, so nearly 2 years, had to work at home. And so the line, the distinction between housing and working places or business became really, really more blurry. And this basically provides this easy example to see that we need to have visions for the future that must be flexible, adjustable, because they need to be applied to different contexts where there are different constraints, different features, of course, different people, and also different potentialities. And so in order to be applied effectively in different territories, we need to be as focused as we can in order to define the vision, but after that, be super flexible in order to know that the future can change. A pandemic crisis could occur suddenly. No one of them would imagine it, but it's here. It's something that we cannot avoid. And so, yeah, common vision, but at the same time, flexibility and adaptability.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Shilashi. This is a very good, insight and inspiration to others. And building resilience, I think, being adaptable, being flexible, and having what the other speakers mentioned, also having the data, having the information, and sharing that, what we have not heard actually is having flexible resources from government for community to adapt in terms of facing the challenges of climate action and building their resilience. Yeah. So thank you very much. I think we have overshot with the time for this session. It is a very rich conversation, very rich engagement, and I'm sure the participants who are listening getting excited with this recommendation. So I will now thank you very much to all the 5 eminent speakers from this session. I would like to pass it to now to Sandeep for the closing remark before I come back with my part of the closing remark, because so that I don't continuously speak. Yeah, Sandeep.
No, you should first have a glass of water. I think it's really early morning for you. Maybe some coffee with it. Thank you for this wonderful session and wonderful experiences by all the speakers. I actually take this moment not to prolong, we are over time, but I actually take this moment to say it was purely inspirational. Listening to each and every honored speaker, our organizers, the opening discussions, as well as the last panel, and all the speakers. I will not take all the names to express our collective gratitude on behalf of the World Urban Campaign, on behalf of the organizers, both of us, Sri and myself, as well as Bert. Deep gratitude, purely inspirational. I think we move this discussion, and I've been following the comments. Please do look at them. There are many links there. But we move this discussion today collectively to what the future solutions could be. We heard very inspirational examples from various UTCs, but not just UTCs, on what urban legislations might be needed, on what ground experiences might be needed, very innovative ways in which some of the solutions are coming out, very micro, macro, as well as meso level solutions, which have a lot of cross learnings for each of us. Sitting in from one continent, this is a very good forum to diffuse knowledge and sharing and experiences onto the others within cities, within countries, and within continents. As I was saying, the future cannot be a mirror of the past foretold. One of our speakers was saying, we all know that. And I think listening in from that vantage point, personally, I want to say that I have today after all these 3 hours that we spent together here, more than 3 hours, I have today a lot of inspiration of what I might do in my organizational, both the World Urban Campaign space, but also my own other organizational spaces and on the ground with communities, such deep, rich experiences. That's my personal takeaway. Much more inspired, much more hopeful, and much more confident that we're not just looking at what the challenges are, but what might be the pathways ahead and what we might now do, as Christine was talking in the beginning, for the future of UTCs, but also together for the future of cities we build, what we might do in the shape of regional campaigns that you would have seen in your mailboxes that are planned with the inspiration we got from the micro campaign on the city of from the city of New Gorna a couple of weeks ago, or less than a couple of weeks ago. Deeply inspirational. Stay connected with us. I express this gratitude. I do hope that as Christine, Damian, and of course Samrant and other organizers have from the Secretariat side have told us, we will be hearing on the discussions today in terms of the recording of the discussions and the minutes of the takeaways from the discussion, as well as some of the comments here. If any of the colleagues who joined in as participants have further questions, do feel free to get in touch with any of us at the World Urban Campaign, and we'll connect you with the speakers or directly in touch with speakers. The idea is to expand circle. The idea is to expand momentums. The idea is to invite more and more. And I think with that hope and optimism and deep word of gratitude for Christine, Damian, Samrant, our co-chairs, Bert, and of course, Sri, and each one of you, I hand it over back to Sri to give her more inspirational vote of thanks. Lovely to be here with you today. And thank you for staying with us right through. Those who had to leave on account of other commitments, a big gratitude would be conveyed to you personally. Thank you so much, and over to you, Sri.
Thank you, Sandeep. I joined Sandeep as the co-chair of the World Urban Campaign to thank you, all the eminent speakers, your insight, your sharing, very inspirational, very encouraging. This is what, you know, the solution, the recommendation that you shared, you know, to bring that to a different level, like what Sandeep said, a pathway to the future, and that we want to expand this campaign also to go at the regional level and not just the global level. For me, I think a few points as we move forward. This solution, this a recommendation. As a campaign, what we want is also to influence and change public policy and processes and practices where it has been stuck, or, you know, not moving with time and the needs of the community and the people that live in the cities and the human settlement. And we hear from some of our speakers just now that, you know, the standard of certain thing is still stuck somewhere. So as a campaign, we will work with you, we will support you in terms of moving with action to change and influence change and culture of how things are being done to actually accommodate an inclusive process that leave no one, no place behind. Yeah, and that's what the city we need now means to all of us. And how do we do that? It's also, this has come up with all of you, many of, almost all the speakers mentioned this. It's about building partnership. It's about building constituencies. It's about, you know, working together, collaboration, because one person may change only one step, but as a group, we change a lot. We are able to, we have constituencies behind us that can push that change, that can inspire others, that can make the authorities see that this is what the people who live in the cities and human settlement want. And if we work together, we will get to the city that we need, the transformative path that we want to build together. The third point that I want to also make, and also hearing this from you, is that building capacities, supporting organization, supporting leadership of people at different level. Yeah, I think that's also a key point in a campaign. How do we work together to strengthen and build capacities at different level, and with all the expertise that all of you bring together, very diverse and very and if we put this together, it's very a resource that cannot be matched from anywhere. All of you bring a lot of experience, a lot of resources. So resources is not only just material in terms of dollar, but also your experience, you know, the knowledge that you have. Yeah. And the last one that actually the UTC has always been promoting is about knowledge, good practice to promote inclusive, sustainable urban development. Yeah. And that knowledge and good practices, how do we nurture that? How do we expand that? How do we make that visible? A peer exchange. Can we work together to actually raise and mobilize resources so that we can bring and support peer exchange if there's demand from one team to another, from one member or from one partner of the urban campaign to another. Yeah, we are excited, and Sandeep mentioned, and Christine also mentioned just now in her sharing at the beginning of the session, that we have a record of this session. We are going to share the key points, and this will be communicated not only to the members of the World Urban Campaign, to the partners of the World Urban Campaign, but within UN Habitat of the different program, different flagship initiative, but also to the member state, you know, because we work with the country, and our government have a lot of say also with, you know, how things are being reported. And I hear during the first session, I think one of the speakers mentioned that, you know, in the VLR, Voluntary Local Report, you know, what is important is to also highlight the change and the indicators of success, of improvement in the community, and not just those indicators that are decided at the global level. You know, the community can decide and must decide, and these need to be part of the documentation. And many of you know that we are also moving into the midterm review of the new urban agenda. So as a campaign, as a community in the World Urban Campaign, how can we make sure that what we have achieved, what we have done at the local level is reflected and considered and acknowledged in the midterm review of the implementation of the new urban agenda, as well as the reporting in the second quadrennial report of the new urban agenda. So with that, thank you very much to everyone, to all the participants, especially the speakers, and very, very special thanks to the hard work of the Secretariat, Christine, Damien, Samran, and my co-chairs, Sandeep and Bert. Thank you very much until we meet again, and we are all in this together. And we will have, I assure you, we will have a special session at the World Urban Forum, and I want all of you together, and we'll be there together. Thank you very much, and have a great day or a restful evening. Thank you very much.
Photo, please. Photo, please.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. We are taking pictures now. If you can put your camera on, so we see many faces, and we are taking photos just now. So if you can do funny faces, show hands. Yes, very good. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye. Island is very late.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Vincent, sorry, I didn't see you. I see you now.
I think his audio is not working, Sandeep. I was trying to look for that.